much to explore here. I will attempt to keep it as succinct as feasible. Whether someone believes this or not doesn't matter. It's just so ridiculous that I have to voice this. I won't sugarcoat anything either, but I will steer clear of any information that would allow someone unfamiliar with the circumstances to identify myself. Up until a few months ago, I was engaged to my 5-year girlfriend. We will call her Sarah. 32-year-old guy. Let's call my younger brother Mike. He is 29 and has always been the perfect child in our family. I have to provide some background on my family and how we came to this place if I truly want to grasp the depth of this betrayal and why it struck me so deeply. Mike could not do anything wrong in our parents' view growing up, whereas I was continuously chastised for the most minor transgressions. This was clear and severe, not simply ordinary sibling rivalry or minor partiality. Mike broke something, and I would be accused. I would be the one grounded while he started a fight. He would get a new video game console if we both received straight A's. I would get a pat on the back and be advised to keep it up. Our parents, Tom and Linda, always found a justification for their actions. Mike's younger brother requires more attention. Given you are the older one, you ought to know better. We have to be careful with Mike, he is just more sensitive. I felt unworthy and unwanted in my own house from the never-ending assault of double standards and gaslighting. The preference just grew as we aged. When I enrolled on a partial scholarship in a decent college, my parents hardly noticed. But they threw Mike a big celebration and purchased him a car to drive with when he decided to enroll in community college. Not mind that for years I had been riding 5 miles each way to my part-time work. I left right away to get away from the poisonous surroundings at home. I worked 2 jobs, pay debt, and negotiate college. Mike left a semester later, saying he didn't belong in college. Our parents entirely agreed with his choice, complimenting him for knowing himself and for not fitting social norms. Over the next 5 years, they even funded his string of failing companies. My family always found a way to drag me back in, even with the space I tried to create between us. Holiday dinners were a torture of subdued jabs and not quite subtle comparisons. "Oh, are you still working at that entry-level job?" "Well, Mike is considering launching another company." He is quite entrepreneurial. Not that I was really laying a solid career while Mike was devouring our folks' retirement money. I tried to keep a friendship with Mike despite all. Though it was always one-sided, he remained my brother after all. I would try to connect, reach out, and he would either ignore me or find some way to make the discussion into a competition he might win. Should I get promoted, he would suddenly have a great opportunity right ahead. If I began dating someone, he would also magically be in a committed relationship. I met Sarah in one of my attempts to get back in touch with Mike. We clicked right away as she was friends with one of his brief relationships. Smart, humorous, compassionate, and extremely beautiful, Sarah was everything I had ever wanted in a companion. We began dating, and for the first time in my life I felt really cherished and joyful. My parents were inevitably less than delighted. They questioned what Sarah saw in me and made disparaging remarks about how she was out of my level. Mike, on the other hand, started abruptly to show great interest in my life. Wanting to know everything about Sarah, he would ask about her nonstop. I was simply glad he seemed to be interested in something from my life at the time. Looking back, I ought to have spotted the warning signs. After 1 year of dating, Sarah and I moved in together and things were fantastic. We both drove, had decent jobs, and discussed the future. I began to feel as though perhaps, just maybe, I could have the great profession, loving partner, maybe even children someday that I had always wanted. On our 4th anniversary, I asked Sarah. It was simply a peaceful supper at home and a moving speech, nothing spectacular. She answered yes, and I thought I was on top of things. We agreed to engage in a protracted process and slow down wedding preparation. We had our whole life ahead of us. Or so I believed. We were not in a hurry. To put it mildly, the responses were mixed when we told my family we were engaged. Saying, "Oh, how nice," in a tone that implied it was anything but, my mother slapped on a fake grin. "Grunt," my dad murmured, "good luck with that," then turned back to watch the TV. Mike, though, had the most unusual response. He praised us, but his smile seemed almost predatory and wrong. I dismissed it then, attributing it to my own fears. Work stress and wedding plans occupied the next year. Working long hours at our jobs, Sarah and I were saving money for the wedding and a down payment on a house. Though we saw less of each other than we used to, I reasoned it was only a phase. Every marriage experiences difficult times. Looking back, I ought to have seen the warning signals. Sarah grew more aloof, constantly on her phone, grinning at texts from someone she would rapidly claim to be merely an acquaintance from work. She began leaving more with her pals, arriving late home smelling of cologne and wine. I did, however, entirely trust her. I never even gave her any thought regarding possible cheating, let alone with my own brother. Sarah started acting somewhat strangely over 4 months ago. She was temperamental, restless, and often sick. Thrilled with the possibility, I considered perhaps she might be pregnant. We had not been trying, but we discussed wanting children at last. Imagining nursery colors and baby names, I began to arrange how I would help her. She dropped the bomb one evening after sitting down with tears in her eyes. Though not mine, she was pregnant. I looked shocked. Our hectic schedules had caused us not to be close in a while, but I never anticipated she would cheat on me. She broke down totally and mumbled, "It's Mike," when I inquired who the father was. My whole universe collapsed in that instant. Everything I knew, everything I had built my life around, came toppling. I found it difficult to breathe. I had no ideas. I could only feel this intense loss and treachery. Sarah tried to clarify. Her words came out in a hurry between sobbing. Apparently, it began during our engagement party. Mike had cornered her and informed her she was making a mistake in marriage. Playing on her insecurities, he reassured her she could do better and he could give her everything I couldn't. They had been having an affair for months, so it was not just a one-time occurrence. That evening, I sent Sarah out. I couldn't stand to look at her or be in the same room as the lady who had so totally betrayed me. She begged me to pardon her, said it was a mistake, said she loved me, but all I could think of was how many times she had lied to my face. She had been with my brother how many times wearing the ring I had given her? I phoned Mike after Sarah went. Not even now can I recall what I said. All of it was a haze of hurt and wrath. At first, he attempted to seem cool, saying it was only a drunken error and that it had no bearing on anything. He became hostile and responded, "Well, maybe if you'd have been a better fiancé, she wouldn't have come to me." When I pressed him, I observed red. Ready to do anything that would cause him regretting what he said, I got in my car and headed to his flat. Though I'm not sure what I intended to do, our parents were already there when I arrived. Mike apparently initially phoned them, crafting some narrative about how Sarah had seduced him and how terrible he felt. And you also know what? They came to believe him. Always they do. While my dad merely stood there with his arms crossed, looking disappointed in me, of course, not in his dear Mike, my mom started lecturing me about forgiveness and family right away. They wouldn't listen when I tried to describe exactly what happened. They insisted that since family comes first, I should forgive Mike and help Sarah through the pregnancy. I forgot. Years of pent-up wrath and bitterness spilled forth. I told them just what I thought of their distorted sense of devotion. How they had always favored Mike at my cost. How they never once stood on my side or helped me. Mike was dead to me, I informed him. He was no longer my brother. Since they no longer had me, I advised my parents they could have the son they had always desired. Ignoring their calls and pleads, I bolted. Without a goal in mind, I drove for hours just desiring to get away from everything and everyone. When I got home, I had hundreds of missed calls and messages, some from Sarah begging for another opportunity, some from Mike alternately between apologies and accusations, but most were from my parents, demanding that I grow up and atone. I seldom ate, hardly slept, ignored them all. Using all of my accumulated vacation time, I called out of business. I avoided everybody and found it intolerable to have to explain what had happened. Trying to find where I'd gone wrong, I simply sat in my apartment going back over every minute of my relationship with Sarah and every contact with Mike. 3 months have gone by now. To handle all this turmoil, I changed my number, relocated to a new apartment, and began treatment. Still, my family won't let go. Even with my best attempts to cut touch, they find ways to meddle in my life. Starting to show up at my place of employment, they are trying to ambush me and drive a reconciliation. Crying about how I'm separating the family, my mother corners me in the parking lot, gruff voicemails from my dad on how I should man up and pardon Mike. Mike has personally tried to approach me on a few occasions, but thus far I have been able to dodge him. To guilt-trip me into forgiving Mike, they have even dispatched flying monkeys, that is, extended family members. Suddenly blowing my phone, aunts, uncles, cousins I haven't spoken to in years are reminding me how important family is and how I should let bygones be. They seem to be living in some other world where what Mike and Sarah did was only a minor error rather than a life-altering one. The most recent growth is yesterday Sarah sent me a note. She intends to co-parent with Mike and is keeping the baby. And now, guess what? About becoming grandparents, my parents are over the moon and totally overlooked the circumstances of how it happened and the nasty comments my mother and father made when Sarah was with me. Apologues and explanations abound in the letter, which discussed how Mike and she had discovered true love in trying circumstances. She even dared to add she hoped the child will benefit from us all being friends someday. I am at the very end of it. Part of me wants to simply sever ties entirely and start over somewhere else. Perhaps go to another state, change my name, create a new life free from knowledge of this mess. Another side of me, though, is so enraged that I want to stay and fight so they may realize how screwed up things are overall. Not sure what to do going forward. Every sphere of my life has suffered from betrayal. Alone with my thoughts makes me uncomfortable. I never gave dating any thought either. I get terrified thinking of depending on someone like that. Folks who believe I should choose the high road and reconcile with my family, as if I am the one in the wrong for not wanting to play happy families with the folks who most wounded me, have lost friends over this too. The idea of Sarah and Mike having a kid together, a child that ought to have been mine, is like a continual knife in my stomach. Logically, the youngster is innocent in all this. The baby's parents are lying, cheating scumbags. It is not the baby's fault. But I cannot feel anything nice about its existence. My parents have begun discussing my obligation to participate in the lives of the child and my role as an uncle. I get sick physically at the idea. How am I expected to approach this child without spotting the final emblem of my brother's treachery? Reddit, I suppose my question is, am I the expletive for not forgiving my brother and ex-fiancé? Is it bad of me to wish to terminate relations with my family over this? Any guidance on how to move forward would be much valued, since right now I feel as though gaslighting and treachery are drowning me in the sea. I understand this was lengthy. If you have read thus far, thank you. In a sense, just writing all this out has been relieving. I'm not sure what I should anticipate from publishing this. Maybe validation, guidance, or maybe just the opportunity to yell into the void and have someone, anybody, hear me. Edit. Holy mess, this exploded overnight. I appreciate all of your support and counsel. The response overwhelms me, and it will take some time to look over all the comments. Nonetheless, I wanted to answer some typical queries. 1. Certainly, I have discussed a restraining order against my family with a lawyer. It is under work. 2. No, I am not intending to interact with the baby. Although the child is not at fault, I cannot be engaged without losing my sanity. 3. For anyone curious about my employment, I have previously discussed the matter with HR. They are sympathetic and aware. They have given me the opportunity to work from home more regularly and raised front desk security levels. I appreciate their awareness. 4. Many of you have inquired whether I have given any thought to migrating to another city or state. I am very definitely considering this. There are offices of my company in various other cities, hence a relocation could be feasible. I am balancing the advantages and disadvantages. 5. To those advocating DNA testing, Sarah came clean about the affair and the chronology fits. I have no cause to think the child isn't Mike's. Even if by some miracle it turned out to be mine, I'm not sure I could ever look at that child without considering this. 6. The volume of persons relating such tales has overwhelmed me. Knowing how frequent this kind of treachery is breaks my heart, but it also curiously comforts me since I'm not alone. I appreciate everyone's vulnerability in sharing. 7. To the person asking whether I had thought about suing Mike for alienation of affection, I investigated it, but sadly, my state does not accept it. Though right now I'm not sure I have the stamina for a legal fight. 8. Several have noted that Mike's actions seem egotistical. Many of the articles I have begun reading about narcissistic personality disorder speak to me. Though not justification, some of his behavior helps me to comprehend. 9. For anyone wondering about Sarah's family, they are as startled and repulsed as one would anticipate. They have cut off communication with her and contacted me to give their support. Though little consolation, I value it. 10. To the person wondering whether I considered having children of my own someday, to be honest, this whole experience has made me doubt whether I want a family at all. I'm trying, though, not to make any major decisions while I'm still digesting things. Though I'll let you know if anything noteworthy occurs. Right now I'm concentrating on recovery and forward movement. Once more, thanks to Reddit. More than you would realize, you have contributed. Your guidance and encouragement have really been a lifeline amid trying circumstances and have given me much to consider. Though I can't answer every remark, kindly know I'm reading them all and they help me feel less isolated in this. Update 1. Hey Reddit, it's been a total roller coaster 2 weeks since my last post. First of all, I want to thank everyone for the great advice and support. Reading over all your responses has been both sad and yet consoling. I never anticipated my post to explode like that. The frequency of this sort of treachery is disorganizing. To put it mildly, the last several weeks have been demanding. Recall my remark of working on a restraining order. That descended into a complete ordeal, though. We had a hearing booked after my attorney turned in the paperwork. Given the facts and ongoing harassment, I felt it would be simple. I corrected myself. With their own attorney, an elegant man in an expensive suit most likely charging more per hour than I earn in a week, my parents turned up for the hearing, claiming I was separating the family over a basic misunderstanding. As if Mike had stumbled and fallen into my fiancé, they painted me as the unstable one. Luckily, the judge was not purchasing it. She issued the restraining order against Mike and my parents, but not without my mother crying in the courtroom and my father gazing at me like I had just committed murder. Mike's expression, though, I swear, if looks could kill, I would be 6 feet under. Mike tried to get to me as we were exiting the courtroom, reminding his attorney of the recently imposed restraining order. She stood between us. Mike merely scoffed and stated that I couldn't hide behind a piece of paper permanently. This is not over. If I said his remarks didn't knock me a bit, I would be lying. For now, at least I have some legal protection. Another dream has been the office scenario. Recall how I mentioned my family had started showing up at my workplace? That reached a head last week, though. My assistant buzzed in reporting my mother was in the lobby and creating a scene while I was in a meeting with a client. She apparently brought a photo album and was trying to show my colleagues infant images of Mike and me as she sobbed over how her boys used to be so close. I left the conference and descended to the lobby, where I discovered my mother surrounded by a bunch of awkward-looking colleagues. She was midway in recounting how Mike and I used to bathe each other when young children. She rushed toward me when she saw me, chatting about a baby shower, but I stopped her. She should leave right away, I told her, or I would call the cops and have her taken off for trespassing against the restraining order. Her expression resembled what I would have slapped her with, but after everything they have gone through, I couldn't muster myself to care. Security let her out, and I had to spend the next hour damage management with my employer and colleagues. Fortunately, most of them were understanding, but I could see others were wondering what kind of drama I was bringing into the workplace. Still, the incident with Mike was where it truly veers off course. I was at the gym last Saturday working out some of my resentment on the punching bag. I was so intent on my exercise that I didn't see someone approaching me until I heard his voice. As I whirled around, Mike was grinning at me like he hadn't just broken the restraining order. He began to run his lips loud enough for others close to hear. He chuckled when I urged him to go before I phoned the police, claiming he would tell them how I had been threatening Sarah and him. I became lost at that point, my fist hooked with his jaw as I struck at him. He stammered back, then launched himself at me. Except this time, no one told me to be the larger person and let Mike win. We ended up on the floor trading punches like we were kids again, without parents to break us up. Before the gym personnel drew us apart, I made a few decent hits. I could feel my eye bulging closed while Mike's nose was bleeding. We were both screaming, seeking release and aiming at one another once more. It was only when the gym manager threatened to call the police that I snapped out of it. I got ready and headed off. Still pulsing with excitement, I answered a call from an unidentified number as I was headed home. Against better taste, I responded to it. Sarah, shouting at me about how I had cracked Mike's nose, might require surgery. I laughed. It was not against Will. Her anger at me following all they had done seemed ridiculous, too much. I apologized to her for hurting her little boyfriend, the one she had been sleeping with behind my back for months. She began to cry then, continuing on about her stress, how the baby could sense her misery and how selfish I could be. I blocked the number and hung on hers. The fight produced quite a strong blowback. News had crept across our social circle like wildfire. Texts from friends and relatives, some supporting me and others calling me names for beating my poor defenseless brother, were exploding on my phone. Reaching out once more, Sarah's parents expressed their dismay in their daughter and reiterated their support of me. Though at this point I'll take anything I can get, it was a meager comfort. Nowadays, the restraining order seems inadequate. Mike has proved he is ready to break it, hence I am concerned about his future actions. The legal fallout has been a horror show. My attorney called me the day following the gym incident. Mike apparently had accused me of assault. I described what had happened. How Mike had provoked me. How he had broken the restraining order. We would fight it, my lawyer groaned, but given that I delivered the first punch, it might be an uphill struggle. We are already pressing our own charges against Mike for breaching the restraining order. Though nothing is definite, my attorney feels sure this will strengthen our case. I had to show the cops the marks on my face and knuckles and make statements to them. Having to defend myself against my own brother makes one embarrassed. Mike and I have been banned from the gym, although I can't say I blame them. It sucks. That gym was one of the only places I felt I could properly release some of my wrath. I have always been close to my cousin Amy, so she contacted me the other day. The family has been complaining a lot about her supporting me, but she is not wavering. She shared with me some of what goes on behind the scenes. My parents apparently have been telling everyone I'm experiencing some sort of mental collapse. They claim I'm just jealous and can't let go since Sarah and Mike's relationship began shortly following our breakup. While some family members are buying it, Amy notes that many others are not. Knowing that they are out there propagating lies about me while I'm trying to keep my head down and heal irritates me. Things at work have been, to put it mildly, strained. I can sense my colleagues are walking on eggshells around me following the incident with my mother in the lobby and the fight with Mike that is trending on local social media. Early this week, my manager summoned me into his office. He began by stating he valued me as an employee and that I'm going through a trying period. But then he really hit me. He believes it would be best if I took a break just till things calm down. If you would want, he continued, we can call it a personal sabbatical. Paid, of course. I wanted to disagree, telling him that right now only work keeps me sane, but I could see the choice had already been taken. I agreed, thanked him for his patience, and got to work packing my office. 2 of my colleagues were gossiping about how my brother had got my fiancée pregnant as I was leaving. I departed slamming my office door louder than required, rather pleased to see them jump. Saying all of this isn't hurting me would be dishonesty. To get out of my apartment, I have started late-night lengthy rides. Sometimes I find myself wondering how the hell my life turned into such a mess when parked outside my previous apartment, the one I lived with Sarah. Amid all of this turmoil, I discovered help from an unlikely source, Sarah's younger sister Emma. Emma contacted me on social media, apologizing for her sister's behavior and lending her support. I was first dubious. What if this were some sort of trick? But after chatting with her, I found she shares my hatred of Sarah's actions. She has been sharing with me details on Sarah and Mike's life. Apparently, they have moved in together and act as though they did not simply blow up many lives to be together. Emma says Sarah has been trying to present herself as the victim in all this, sobbing to anybody who will listen about how she never meant to hurt anyone. And in what ways she and Mike are soulmates who found each other against all odds. I get ill to my stomach from it, but I appreciate Emma keeping me current. After all, information is power, even if it is knowledge I would prefer not have. Another horror has been the social media scenario. When it comes to social media, I have always been a really quiet person. But this whole incident has put me in an unwelcome public view. On a local Facebook group, someone, probably one of Mike's buddies, posted about our gym brawl. The post omitted our names, but it sufficiently detailed the circumstances to allow anyone who knows us to work it out. The section on comments became a battlefield. Some people were supporting me, claiming Mike received his just compensation. Others called me erratic and advised I should be locked up. One night after a few too many beers, I made the grave error of looking over some of the comments. I ended up hard enough tossing my phone across the room to break the screen. Since then, I have turned off most of my social media accounts. The continuous alerts and the messages from folks I haven't spoken to in years suddenly wanting all the juicy specifics of my personal life make me unable to handle it. Having all that has transpired, I have come to see I cannot continue to live in this city. Too many memories abound. Too many opportunities for running across either Mike or Sarah or my parents. I've been researching moves inside my organization. Our Seattle office has a seemingly interesting opening. Though I've never loved continuous rain, at this point I would relocate to the moon if it would mean escaping all this drama. Though I have not yet made any decisions, the concept of a fresh start is growing more and more intriguing. New city, new apartment, new life. Somewhere nobody remembers me as the man whose brother knocked down his fiancée. Since the restraining order was obtained, my parents have been unusually silent. I'm waiting for the other shoe to fall so they may find some fresh approach to try to push their way back into my life. Sarah has been distributing the word of her pregnancy all around. Emma tells me she has been sharing regular updates on social media, ultrasound images, belly shots, the works, always with a caption regarding how grateful she and Mike are, how thrilled they are to start their family. Every additional bit of data feels like a fresh wound opening. The hurt just waiting to resurface when I start to heal. Right now, then, is where things stand. I felt 2 weeks ago that my life could not become any more disorganized, but strangely it has. I still hurt and am angry, but I also am exhausted, tired of justifying myself. Thus Reddit, I suppose this is more of an update than a change of direction. Not sure, a cry into the emptiness. Right now, I'm not even clear about what I'm asking for. Advice? Affordability? Time machine? I could go back and never introduce Sarah to my brother. I'll attempt to keep you all informed whatever occurs going forward. More to me than you could realize is the result of your support. It's encouraging to be reminded that even if it seems as though lies and treachery rule my entire life, there are still decent individuals out there. Final update. Hey Reddit, I'm back with what I expect to be my last post on this entire fiasco after not updating for a week. First of all, I want to thank each of you for your help and guidance along this process. During the worst of my life, your comments have been a lifeline. Where therefore ought one to start? In just 7 days, a lot has transpired. I am still working to sort it all. I suppose I would begin with the most important news. I'm relocating. Indeed, that's correct. I jumped in and agreed to a transfer to our Seattle headquarters. Though it was not a simple choice, I felt I needed a fresh start following all that had gone down. The choice followed last week's really difficult day. I had just returned from another meeting with my attorney regarding Mike's assault allegations when I came upon a note in my mailbox. From Sarah it was. Curiosity won me over even though I nearly threw it away without opening it. Inside was a handwritten note discussing her and Mike's great excitement about their baby and an ultrasonic image. She continued on regarding how the baby would love to have its uncle in its life and how I could find it in my heart to be pleased for them. Red caught my eye. I had grabbed my phone, unblocked Sarah, and phoned her before I knew what I was doing. She grabbed up the second ring and I let loose. I informed her exactly what I considered her, Mike, and their contented small family to be. If she believed I would ever want anything to do with that child, I told her she was insane. As far as I could tell, Mike, the baby, and she could all go to hell. Though it wasn't my best moment, it seemed like I'd at last uttered all the things I had been holding back. I realized then I had to leave this city. That same evening, I phoned my supervisor and said I wanted to move to Seattle. To be really honest, he seemed relieved. He was probably concerned about how this drama would damage the business. He guaranteed to expedite the documentation, and by the next morning it was official. 2 weeks allowed me to pack my life and go across the nation. My family and social circle soon started to buzz with word of my relocation. Normally, my parents were rather angry. Once more breaking the restraining order, they showed up at my flat unannounced trying to talk me out of it. Saying I was deserting the family, my mother was crying. Red-faced and furious with my selfish and immature behavior, my dad was ranting. I stayed quiet. I just phoned the cops and had them taken off for breaching the restraining order. My mother yelled that I would regret this, that family was everything, and I was throwing it all away as they were being let out. I just closed the door and resumed packing. Mike responded in a different way. Presumably because of ongoing legal concerns, he did not try to personally reach out to me. Instead, he posted a long piece on social media on how some people struggle to see others happy and on how he and Sarah were overcoming hate to concentrate on their new family. Clearly meant for me, it sought to present himself as the victim. Though I'll confess it stung to see how many people liked and commented in support of him, I told myself that their viewpoint doesn't count as they don't know the reality. Among the most unexpected responses was Sarah's. Following our phone talk, she contacted her sister Emma, who, should you recall, had been keeping me informed on Sarah and Mike's developments. My statements apparently struck closer than I had anticipated. Emma informed me Sarah had broken down, confessing she was afraid of the future and felt what she and Mike had done was terrible. Bless her, my cousin Amy said she could help me pack. She even informed me further about the family situation. Amy informed me that my aunt, the sister of my mother, had a major blowout with her mother, calling her out for consistently favoring Mike and driving me away. It grew really heated, with my aunt remarking that with their years of favoritism, my mom and dad were reaping what they had created. That someone is at last calling them out on their behavior makes me somewhat happy. Although the legal matter is still under flux, my attorney tells me that my relocation has no bearing on anything. Mike broke the restraining order, hence we are still charging him fees, and we are contesting the assault accusations he leveled against me. Given Mike's track record of breaking the restraining order, my attorney feels sure the judge would see through his lies. Moving across the nation should also help prove that I am not a threat to Mike, thereby helping to have his charges dropped. After this, I'm not sure whether I will publish any more updates. Starting anew means bidding farewell to the past, and as beneficial as this community has been, I believe it's time for me to distance myself from rewriting this narrative. I have to concentrate on starting my new life instead of muckering the old one. This thus seems to be my last update. Hope for me, Reddit. In Seattle, I have a completely fresh life ready for me and want to maximize it. Dad planned to marry his young girlfriend just weeks after my mom's death, threatening to kick me out. Am I the asshole for ruining his wedding? My father has always mistreated me badly. He was obviously not interested in being a dad from a very young age, but I never could find out which he disliked more, being married to my mother or father to me. Given that he treated my mother no better than he treated me, I believe he must have loathed it equally. I lost my mother only 4 weeks back. I turned 17 some months ago. It was not surprising. She had been battling lung cancer for some time and at last passed away in a hospital. 3 years ago she was diagnosed. Since then, it felt like I had been holding my breath. I believe I at last let it all go when Mom died. She was my friend, thus even now it feels quite strange to be without her around. She was most crucially the only person there to guard me from my father. Every single day in the house where I grew up, my parents would argue over something or another. They obviously did not love one another, and I really have no idea why they were married. My mother would tell me that they had loved each other at some time every time I asked her why she had married him. They would always make up, but I never could forgive my father as fast as my mother did. She had been urged to leave him several times as occasionally he would say extremely terrible things to her during a quarrel. He would say things like how he wishes she died from her illness so he could go on with his life and how he regretfully ever was with her and had a child with her. She just resisted when I advised her to go several times. I'm not sure why. Regarding myself, I had wanted to go from the age of 4 years old but had nowhere else to go and no other relatives either. Raised by her grandmother, who passed away while she was in college, my mother was an orphan who had lost her parents in an accident when she was small. She contacted no other family members, hence I knew nothing about my father's side of the family as he never took us to see them. He claimed not wanting us to see his family since he did not get along with them. There was no elaboration, and I asked him too, afraid. I was used to being screamed at for stuff, hence I wasn't going to paint a bullseye on myself by prying into anything like that. I had to deal with my father since, all told, my parents were the only family I had. My mother refused to go. I was heartbroken when she died, but my dad carried on as though nothing had happened. It was not shocking to me in the least since he had been acting the same way even when she was unwell. Knowing he did not love anyone, I did not expect him to be sensitive. He most likely lacked even that ability. What truly startled me, though, was that my dad brought home a considerably younger woman once we were finished with the funeral and paperwork 2 weeks after my mother died. She was simply here one morning drinking coffee in our living room. My father told me she was my new mother when I plucked the bravery to ask her who she was. When he was telling me that, he apparently also had the largest smile on his face, probably his creepiest one yet. Against my will, I found myself remarking on it. Since it had only been 2 weeks since my mother died, I told him it was a little too soon to bring his girlfriend home. That brought me to a lecture from him on how this would be my stepmother in a few days and on the need of respecting her. He told me he didn't care that I had just lost my mother. I had to treat her the same way I had treated my own mother. He dropped another bombshell on me and informed me he was getting married as I was over myself with rage trying to argue with him. Ever since her diagnosis, he claimed, he had known that she would not be able to make it as she had always been delicate and frail ever since he had known her. He had thus begun searching for substitutes. That is exactly the word he used. For the past 2 years he had been with Melissa, his girlfriend. Now that my mother was at last out of the way, he told me he was planning to be married once more and ensure her death had no impact on his life at all. It at once made sense why he had been untouched by my mother's illness and death thus far. He had replaced her. I honestly just turned away from him because I was disgusted. I told him I would not be attending the wedding, and expected him to say he was good with it since, really, why would he care? Then he informed me I had to go, which caught me off guard. He informed me he could only make this look regular and acceptable to other people if I attended, so explaining why it was. He seemed to be saying that by showing up for the wedding, I would have accepted it and that since his own daughter had not objected to this marriage, nobody else would have any cause to remark on it either. Basically, he required me to be there so it would seem less depraved, which in and of itself was really crazy. To be honest, my father seemed insane. Besides saying such strange and pointless things, he was getting married 2 weeks after his wife died without thinking about what other people would say. Not only that, the woman marrying him was only 25 at most, a few years older than I am. Her actual age is unknown, however she cannot be older than that. My dad falls in late 40s. This man, who recently lost his wife to cancer and should be in mourning right now, is instead getting married and expecting his daughter to act like this is all normal and that she supports it. It is eerie enough. He definitely belongs in a straitjacket in a padded room. It's a complete formula for catastrophe. I told him there was no way I could be at this wedding when he informed me he was marrying Melissa. He was free to become offended at that as desired. Then he informed me he would not only be offended but also kicked me out should I miss a meeting. He would also ensure that I never got access to the college fund my mother and he had been saving for me ever since my birth. Since, as he had stated, my mom's money had gone into the education fund as well as his, so I considered it to be essentially unjust. Although I think I was entitled to it, Sadly, I couldn't make him turn over the money to me as it is not required by law. There were no records to support it, hence it was not as if he had set it aside especially for that purpose. Basically, I would be tossed out and would not have any chances of attending college either if I skipped that wedding. On one hand, I did not want to seem like I was part of this or that I was encouraging this craziness in any kind whatsoever, thus I was in a quite tough situation. However, I also had to look out for myself as I had a few months left before I left for college and I couldn't afford to lose money since I had none of my own. My mother's will takes some time to process, hence I would only obtain the inheritance only then. For now, it seemed as though my only choice was to show up for the wedding and present myself as helping my father. Last week I was informed about the wedding, but I just couldn't get myself to welcome it. I thus resolved that I had to go all out to prevent this from occurring, or at least try to intervene. I told my father I would be at the wedding, but then I started searching for something, anything, to throw off the proceedings since I just couldn't bring myself to let this happen. I just wanted something. I really had no idea what I was looking for. When my father left his laptop alone, I got quite lucky, miraculously lucky. A few days back, he and Melissa went out to celebrate their marriage by dinner. I was alone at home. Leaving his laptop on the coffee table, my dad had since it was locked. I expected nothing when I opened it, therefore I just tried to guess the password. Fortunately, I got everything just perfect. Melissa's name came first, then his own birthday, which was strangely startling. Still, once I arrived, I could hardly believe it. I first found nothing when I started browsing his social media. Then I saw he had 2 Facebook profiles, and I chose to review the second one, which I had not seen before. Surprising me was his hidden account set up for his side of the family. He had been telling my mother and me he did not get along with his family, but here he was on his other page hanging out with individuals we had never seen before who seemed to be certainly linked to him. As I searched, additional pictures from years past turned up. He obviously has been in contact with his family all along. He had simply been fooling us. I then chose to review his communications on that account and discovered that he had been in contact with his parents for really a lengthy period. I guess he also carried another phone. From the start, he had been living essentially 2 lives, and nobody knew. Although my mother had known about some of this, she had never shared anything with me. Neither had my mother. I was rather sure his family knew nothing about me whatsoever. Following his talks with his father on his account, I discovered that his father believed he was living away from home for business only, nothing else. He had a full family here, little knowing of it. I snapped brief pictures of those conversations and turned to my own phone to talk to my grandfather. Given all of this was so absurd, I was really anxious about whether he would even believe me. I could hardly believe it myself. Still, I went to my room and signed in using my own Facebook account. I got in touch with the profile I saw on my dad's page. As I had predicted, there had been no mutual friends, so I had never been able to locate him. I had never been able to track these people as I hadn't even known my grandfather's true name for all these years. Having his account now, I messaged him straight away and tried to rapidly explain everything. This was an emergency, hence I provided him my phone number and advised him to get in touch as soon as he could. I included additional pictures of the screenshots I'd taken, outlining how I had tracked his profile. I also sent some pictures of me with my parents so he would know this was not a hoax directed on him. After not hearing anything for the following 12 hours, I nearly gave up hope. Maybe he had chosen not to react since he felt someone was pulling a practical joke on him. But I eventually got a call from my granddad when Dad was at work. I was simply lucky that he had phoned me before that and had not mentioned this to my father. Anyway, I answered my phone and told him what was happening as soon as he called. For the past 17 years, he informed me, he had been made to believe that my father was working elsewhere. That is, away from Iowa, where he was originally from. Apparently, my dad had a separate house and everything here, which is where my grandparents had lived whenever they paid him visits. He had also visited his son several times. About none of this, they had the least of knowledge. They had spent the last 12 hours trying to get over the shock of it all. At first, this all seemed to them as a joke, but they came to recognize it was real when they viewed my mother in the family pictures I had emailed. Apparently, my father had told his parents he had broken up with my mother, so he had never told them about his marriage and the family he had. They disapproved of her 18 years ago, when my parents first began dating. He had informed my grandparents he had dumped her as they were quite clear they did not want my father to marry my mother. For the past 2 decades, it was the fiction he had been selling. Now he had at last been caught. My grandparents had not wanted my father to wed my mother for really serious reasons. It was because they accused my mother of being a gold digger and she had reportedly been trying to cheat on him. This was due in part to the first time my father had brought my mother home to see his parents. She had instantly targeted his older brother, a surgeon who clearly made more than my father. My uncle's refusal to keep his lips shut over something so significant led my grandparents to learn about it. My father had been asked to split up with my mother, but he had turned down their proposal. I believe it was because of me since, based on my calculations, my mother most likely already was pregnant by then. My parents were given an ultimatum. Either they would cut him off from their life or he would split up with my mother. They understood she was only with him for the money, hence cutting him off would drive my mother to leave him. Eventually, my dad told them he had split things off with my mother, although obviously he had not, as they remained together. And this is the reason I'm here. If my mother had really done such things, I wonder why they stayed together. This fundamentally altered my view of both my parents. Once I knew these things though, I told my grandparents how badly I was being treated and that I had nowhere else to rely on. But I was depending on them now that I knew they existed and wasn't as alone as I had first thought. I still would understand if they turned away from me. Thank goodness they decided to assist me. I was able to stop the wedding from taking place. Like his parents, I returned to my father's house also. 2 days ago they flew down here. Yesterday, I managed to slip them into the wedding. All of a sudden, we were honored guests. Our backyard was the venue for the wedding as just a small number of guests were expected to attend. It was supposed to be a modest and private ceremony. Only my father's colleagues and boss, a couple of his acquaintances, and that was it. He had obviously not invited his family. They had not even received invitations to his first marriage. But I arranged for their attendance at the second. I emailed my grandparents and informed them it was finally time for them to show up as I wanted to halt everything before the vows were taken. Melissa had walked down the aisle and everything. I slipped out right before the vows, and then it was my turn to walk down the aisle with my grandparents for the theatrical purposes of it all. My father's face dropped and Melissa seemed fairly perplexed as soon as he saw me walking down the aisle with his parents. Once I drew close to him, I declared that his parents now knew the truth, that I had at last exposed all his falsehoods. He could bid farewell to his inheritance since all was now coming to me rather than to him. Since I already had a place to live, people looking after me, and also my college fund, I no longer needed him either. Knowing he was a liar, I did not want to be with him, so he could do anything he pleased. I then left with my grandparents, and since then we have been staying in a hotel getting ready for our trip back. Since I haven't known these folks, my grandparents need a lot of catching up. Likewise, there is plenty to discuss about my parents. We haven't returned yet mainly because this morning my father finally got in touch with my grandfather and informed him that what he did was simply not proper. He had supposedly never allowed his parents to be happy and accused them of trying to control him all his life. Saying I just couldn't stand to see him happy with anyone else, he also accused me of trying to ruin him by showing up at the wedding like that. Since Melissa is now avoiding him and the wedding was clearly called off yesterday itself, immediately after we left, he is blaming all of us. I am therefore good with showing up for his second wedding with his parents and exposing him for lying. Update 1. The wedding call-off was 4 days ago. I decided not to answer my father. He does not deserve it. My grandparents agreed as well. He knows where to find us should he wish to communicate with us. We still occupy the hotel. We have provided him with the specifics. If he would want to talk with us, he could come see us and then we could have a personal conversation. But the kind of conversation we wish to conduct over the phone or via text is not this one. He still hasn't turned up yet, and just 3 days remain before I return to Iowa with my grandparents. They have a farm there. They're really wealthy, and I will be taken care of considerably better than I was here. They assured me that they would see to it that I could attend the college of my choosing and that I wouldn't have to suffer following this. Since we first met, my grandparents have been almost pampering me. I believe they are attempting to make up for lost time, which is rather lovely of them. Though they seem to love me a lot, they loathe my mother and subsequently my father as well. Update 2. My grandparents and I are meant to be leaving in 2 days. My father decided this morning to at last pay us a visit and speak with us. When they contacted me this morning, I was really taken aback to see him in my grandparents' hotel room, but I immediately recovered and vowed not to talk to him the whole time until he apologized. Clearly though, given someone like him, that is too much to demand. He was here just to discuss how unfair it was that my grandparents had opted to cut him off from their life and hand me all the wealth instead. He claimed to have already lost Melissa, my mother, and his wife as well. Things were already really terrible for him since I also wanted no more contact with him. To top it all, his close friends and colleagues, all the attendees of the wedding, are now acting strange with him. What transpired at the wedding has damaged his reputation. Hence he is thinking of leaving his employment. He believes he cannot operate in such a hostile environment. To put it plainly, he had kind of lost all he owned till a few days earlier. Then we showed him at the wedding, exposed him, and wrecked everything for him. The least we could do was let him inherit, something he had been striving for years. Otherwise, he would not have lied to all of us for so long in the first place. He started lying since he merely wanted everyone to be happy. After marrying my mother, he said he had intended to tell his parents the truth, but as time went on it became more embarrassing to bring up. He had to keep up his lies and arrange a complex double life. Since everyone, including his parents, was against his happiness, he asserted he was the victim. Now, knowing I would be taken care of anyway, he came here to claim what he felt due to him, the legacy. From the start, he had been hoping and fighting for this. It would be unfair to deny it for such a minor cause. The way he was behaving as the victim infuriated me already. I lost it totally when he declared he deserved the fortune. I screamed out at him before my grandparents could say anything. If you really deserve that inheritance, then I also deserve to be treated like a human being for the past 17 years. He had never shown me any love, affection, or even the smallest of respect. 2 weeks after I lost my mother, he had genuinely threatened to kick me out and use my education fund for his own expenses if I opposed his marriage to his young girlfriend. It was only fair his parents took away anything he thought he deserved since he could not give me anything I deserved. My behavior startled him since I had never before stood up to him like that. But now, thanks to my grandparents, I no longer felt terrified of him. Usually when I was younger, this worked to shut me down. He tried to glare at me, but this time I wasn't going to be silent. Earlier, I would do that since I knew my mother wouldn't leave, probably for the same reason my father didn't cut off relations with his parents, money, which upon her death, was ultimately futile. Her only advantage from living with him was passing away at a reputable hospital. My dad tried to yell at me when I refused to be quiet, but my grandparents told him it wasn't going to work anymore. My grandparents threatened to call security on him, thus after some conflict he had to leave. He wouldn't get anything unless he owned and accepted his mistakes. They were very plain. It would take a lot even then for them to pardon him. Had I chosen to keep the inheritance for myself, he would not have anything at all. Promising he would make sure we'd pay the price for what we had done, he fled like a toddler having a tantrum. What he believed he was doing is unknown to me. Though he most likely thought his actions would frighten us, it did not. It strengthened our conviction that, by not forgiving him, we were doing morally. He was not even remorseful, hence nothing could be forgiven. It gives me great pleasure to be leaving with my grandparents in a few days. I simply want to escape all of this. Although I will miss my buddies, it makes no difference now. Fall brings my trip to college. I just finished all of this. I graduated from high school. Update 3. Hi. So I left home 1 year ago. I haven't blogged anything for the previous few months since I have been really busy with college. I had essentially forgotten about it too. Following that battle with my dad in the hotel room, which I discussed in my last update, my grandparents and I headed off. We hardly spoke with my dad over the following 2 weeks, but I did run across a lot of members of his side of the family. I believe this family is the one I deserved all along. They all love me. Though she was too self-serving, my mother most likely attempted to love me. Ultimately, it damaged me more than it did her. My uncle assured me he would pay for my college tuition, therefore relieving me of any concern about it. That has been a great comfort. Though they had hardly known me for a few weeks, these folks had already resolved to show me all the affection I had been lacking for the past 17 years. For that, I am most grateful. A few months after moving in with my grandparents, I had to go to college, so I spent little time with them. My college is near where they reside, so on weekends I get to see them. There are no grievances regarding that. Not to apologize, but rather to remind me that I wrecked him and should feel bad. My father has tried to get in touch with me multiple times. He continues asking me to check on my grandparents to see whether he fits the inheritance. He emails and chats from several accounts but doesn't understand that being defensive won't support his cause. A sincere and honest apology would be the only thing that could assist him. Yet at this time, it is too little, too late. I will simply ignore him. It is not worth it to reply to him. I lack the time or will to indulge his illusions. At last, I have the family I am due and am content with them. Right now, I'm loving my college life. So I will concentrate on the advantages in my life and attempt to forget about the past. I simply want to keep on improving personally. Am I the asshole for telling my morbidly obese patient that we need a team of people to help roll her to avoid hurting our backs? Hi, med-surg nurse here. I got a new patient last night. She is a 450-ish lb woman in her 30s who just had a major surgery. She is also a body positivity influencer, who wanted to record everyone to document her journey. We had to explain to her that in our state, she cannot record any hospital employees without their consent, and all of us are refusing consent because we do not want to be in her videos. Anywho, she needed to use the bedpan. She could not lift her hips, and her legs were too wide for me to wiggle the bedpan between them. I explained to her that she would have to roll on her side, and then I would place the bedpan under her, and then she would roll back. She tried to roll but couldn't do it. I told her no big deal. I will go find a few staff members to help and we will roll you. The only person who could help at the time was the CNA, who is pregnant. I explained to the patient that we just don't have enough staff free right not to roll her. It's just me and the CNA, so we will have to wait a little bit for more people to be free. She huffed and asked why the two of us can't just roll her. I explained that I don't want either of us to hurt our backs, especially not my pregnant CNA, and that it would be safer for us to wait for more people. Side note, this patient sucked at rolling herself. She was dead weight, putting in little to no effort. She was pissed at me saying that, and she wanted to speak to my charge nurse. She said I hurt her feelings. My charge nurse ended up being part of the team that helped me roll her, and while we were doing it she basically scolded the patient and said that her feelings are not more important than us not getting injured. She still thinks I'm an asshole, and I happily offered her the phone number she can call to file a formal complaint. Those do literally nothing, by the way. I was sick to my stomach when I discovered my wife's secret Google account, which contained hundreds of photos of my ex-girlfriend. I, 36, met my wife Bailey, 33, 9 years ago through mutual coworkers, and we hit it off immediately. I fell absolutely head over heels with this woman. She was everything I was looking for. I had gotten out of a toxic, dare I say abusive long-term relationship right before that with a woman Bailey had been acquainted with, but not friends with. I had her blocked on everything and had no contact with her since breaking up. We got married right after the tail end of the pandemic, bought our first house together, and started trying to conceive. That was difficult because Bailey has PCOS, but last year she finally gave birth to our first daughter. I'm having a blast being a dad. It's kind of a dream come true. I finally got my happy life with my perfect wife. My perfect wife. Until last Monday. My laptop's battery hit the bed, so I opened up Bailey's work tablet with an attached keyboard. You can set it up like a monitor to check on some tax stuff. She wasn't home, it was just me and the baby, but we've never asked permission to use each other's devices. We've always been open like that. There's nothing for us to hide. That's what I thought. When I opened up the internet, I noticed she had the incognito tab open. Never in a million years did I expect to discover what I did. My wife has a secret Google account with a photo album saved called XX. So I clicked on it. Did I discover an affair? Nudes? Nope. In this Google album were over 300 photos, 348 actually, of my ex. The woman I was with right before I met Bailey. The woman who tormented me and made me feel worthless. The album said it was started back right around the time Bailey and I started dating, and was updated as recently as 2 weeks ago. The photos range from candid shots with family, to pictures at her work functions. There were even pictures from her yearbook. I don't know how Bailey could have found her high school yearbook photos. Photos from vacations, Idaho photos from work. Pictures of her in crowds, screenshots of videos and screen recordings of videos. Just her. The other people in the photos would be scribbled out, or the photo would be cropped and zoomed in just on my ex. There were other disturbing things I found too. There was another album with just zoomed up pictures of my ex's hair. Come to think of it, Bailey had recently started wearing her hair different and my ex had a very identifiable hair type. There was another album with screenshots of comments on social media. Of course I can't find them because I have her blocked. Like, the Facebook group she's in and public posts. And my ex is very low-key on social media. I can't imagine the lengths Bailey went to find them. My ex literally lives in another country now. There were also different links to the exact outfits she was wearing. Like very specific blouses and trousers you'd have to really go looking for to find. A specific water bottle I remembered purchasing, and identical hiking boots and sandals. So basically, my partner of almost a decade has been a single white female. My girlfriend has secretly stalked her to the point of buying her exact clothes and changing her hair. And now I'm starting to realize Bailey's new interests over the years were just my ex's. Bailey has turned herself into my ex. Everything feels like a lie. Our love feels like a lie. The things we share feel like a lie. I threw up and had a panic attack. I looked at our daughter and felt betrayed. I haven't confronted her yet. I don't know if I want to. I want to run away with our daughter. I want to print out all her pictures, leave them on the table, and disappear. I don't know what to do, I just want to throw up. Relevant comments. Shmai. Holy cow. That definitely is alarming. The best thing to do is address it now to see what'll change if she no longer has someone to replicate. The toxic side of me would slowly start mentioning things like, you know, you really do remind me of someone, and nonchalantly bite into an apple and walk away. OP, I feel like what's worse is that she's subtly made these changes over time under my nose. So my ex has a specific career and Bailey didn't express interest in switching careers to the exact same thing until after I had mentioned what my ex did. Didn't notice at the time, but I remember telling her ex went to school for that. The hair was more recent, the outfits and objects, slowly over time. The interests, I'm not sure how much she's stolen personality-wise from my ex and what she actually likes. It's all incredibly exhausting and confusing. Miss_chapstick. I'm so sorry. This sounds like something out of creepypasta. OP, I'm actually surprised with the amount of support I've gotten here in the last hour, haha. Believe it or not, there are no other red flags in our marriage. Now I don't know what else I've missed. OP added. While I talked about my ex, most of the things I told my wife about were negative and painted her in not such a good light. My wife knows these things and knows they were traumatic. Of course, I've mentioned things like what she does for a living and things she used to do. I think everything else she found she got through intense cyberstalking through my ex's friends and family. The yearbook photos, I have no idea. Edit, removed specific info so I don't accidentally dox myself. Update. I'm pretty sure I accidentally got my original post removed just now because I tried to update it with a link to my update. Oops. Anyway, I'm the guy who found the Google Drive full of pictures of my ex. So, I was not expecting my original post to go viral on YouTube and TikTok and have so many responses. Yikes. I am overwhelmed by the support. I am humbled by the number of people who have been through this experience, on both sides. I have an update, but it's probably not as exciting and as juicy as you want. It's not bad though. First, let me clear things up. If people think this post is fake because it doesn't make sense, or are trying to conceive timeline is short, or the way I worded things makes it look like a teenager or woman wrote it, continue to think that because it means I've successfully been vague enough and worded things to not accidentally dox myself. Believe this is a creative writing exercise, so I don't embarrass myself. For real. No, I didn't actually throw up. I was in the middle of a panic attack. Private browsing. Tabs were open to the websites with clothing and objects. Another tab was signed into Google Photos. When I exited the Google Photo tab to look at the websites with clothing and came back, it was already signed out and I couldn't get back in. A lot of the clothing I recognized wasn't because I remembered my ex wearing them. There were more recent pictures of her in the file wearing them, and I remember the day Bailey bought the water bottle that also happened to be in the folder. The hair. Bailey and my ex are the same race and my ex wore braids in a particular way. Not so particular that it's exclusive to my ex, because Bailey has also worn different braids, but seeing pictures of her made me put two and two together. Is there any way Bailey could have gotten with me in an attempt to get to my ex? Was Bailey possibly obsessed with my ex before she met me? Probably not, because Bailey grew up here and my ex originally moved here for university. And while you can drive across the border, it's not that easy and I don't think Bailey was going back and forth to stalk her in person. Also, the reasons why my ex and I broke up have nothing to do with Bailey and she could not have had any involvement. On to the actual update. The next day when I had calmed down I called several social workers and therapists. I was planning to confront her there. Unfortunately, the only places that take our insurance did not have an opening for another couple weeks. So despite what a lot of you think, I've known my wife for nearly a decade and even while I was confused and upset and doubting things, I didn't think she'd be a danger to me. We took the baby to grandma's and I asked her to go for a walk with me. I did not beat around the bush and straight up told her I found the folder. Her face got very red and she was frozen, but also tried to play dumb at first. I was persistent and she started crying and begged me not to leave her. This is what I uncovered. Bailey first started looking up my ex out of curiosity. To keep tabs, I guess. But over time it became more pathological. It's like she got addicted to it, but she also wanted to please me. Okay, maybe I talked about my ex a lot more than I thought, and Bailey wanted to emulate the good parts. She told me she really doesn't know who she is, and my ex's image was something she latched onto because she had me first. Finding information about her became a game. Finding the clothing and objects became a game, by searching things like blue water bottle green stripe, until the couple compared the product to a photo and found the exact one. The reason why I couldn't find the post wasn't because I had blocked my ex, but because my ex had made a new Facebook under a different name. Bailey found her profile by searching up a family member. She made fake social media and added enough mutual friends until she could see my ex's posts, and until her private Instagram accepted her. She weaseled her way into her exercise Facebook group, where the videos were posted, and searched her school on a yearbook website to find the yearbook pictures. Over time, she just collected the images and would get excited to find something new, despite the fact that my ex is extremely private on social media. The folder had originally been called Hex the Ex. In case I discovered it, she was going to make the excuse of saving the pictures to put a hex on her. When she made a burner Google account, she deleted the old folder and named the new one XX. Then she got sloppy and comfortable, and that's right around the time I just happened to open the work tablet. We took a break. It was a while. We made it to couples counseling, and Bailey and I also began seeing separate therapists. She still has not had an assessment with a psychiatrist, but it's on the list. She promised to stop and deleted the album in front of me. Slowly, certain clothing items began to disappear from the closet. I still do not entirely trust her, and that is for me to work on. I'm afraid she has another secret account somewhere, like a backup. The physical mimicking is actually stopping though, including the hair change. We're still not okay. I want us to be okay, and it's okay if that takes time. If we end up not being okay, then that's something I have to deal with. What I do know is that my wife is incredibly insecure, probably mentally ill, and is misled. I don't really want to walk away from that. Although this probably isn't the most exciting update, I appreciate the private messages I just couldn't get back to, Reddit cares, and links to resources. I'm not sure how I feel about social media, YouTube and TikTok picking up on my story though. That's wild. Until next time, if I ever give another update, I hope it's a good one. Relevant comments. Biscuit Brown, the outcome does not look positive. Why stay in a one-sided relationship? At least put a plan together that runs concurrently so you're prepared should it not work out. Seek legal advice, prepare evidence, and don't do anything stupid. At least then you will be in a better place, either way. OP, a plan is something I'm still having trouble coming up with. And it's been a couple months. I think I'm afraid to make a plan. Does that make sense? My wife and I recently encountered a significant issue with her parents because they used X39 patches on our daughter without our consent. I know how the title sounds, but please bear with me. Throwaway for obvious reasons. I, 24, and my wife, 24, recently had our daughter in July. She is the best thing to ever happen to my wife and I, and we couldn't be more thrilled to have our little bundle of joy. She recently got sick while staying with her grandparents, my in-laws, while my wife and I took a trip for work. For context, my in-laws are really big into LifeWave X39. It's a patch that supposedly helps regrow stem cells by reflecting light rays back into your body, allowing your body to produce more stem cells to fight off diseases and sickness. If you ask me, it sounds like snake oil, and my wife agrees, calling it a pyramid scheme. The only way to get said patches is by spending well over $1,000, and then you're tasked with selling the patches yourself. It's essentially some multi-level marketing product, where the more patches you sell, the more money you make. Falling right in line with my wife's comparison to a pyramid scheme, but MLMs are somehow legal. Now I've tried doing research on X39, and the only comments I've seen praise said product are brand new accounts never used before or after, or their entire profile is dedicated to shilling out for LifeWave/X39. In my own research, they appear to just be overpriced stickers. They contain no medication, no special UV rays or anything of the sort. They're literally just an overpriced sticker with an air bubble. But my wife and I have made it very clear that we wanted no part in X39, nor did we want our daughter to have it. Even if it's fake, we wanted no part in it, and on the off chance it did something, I didn't want our daughter to be used as their lab rat or guinea pig. Now before we left our daughter with my in-laws, we provided them with some infant medication, just in case she got sick. Can never be too safe, you know? Well, we returned home from the work trip early because our daughter wasn't getting any better. So we picked her up and went home. We were going to give her a bath, and in the process of taking her jacket off, we found an X39 patch on her arm. Upon finding it, we immediately called her parents and demanded to know why she had a patch on her. Her parents tried saying that it's safe for the baby. We even ordered the ones for ages 7 and younger. And that it's practically medication. Their words, which still didn't answer our question. So my wife checked the go bag, and the Motrin we gave them was, while it was used, not used very much at all. Her parents tried claiming that someone else in their group or whatever gave it to their son and they got better in a week. Point is, we didn't buy it nor did we care. We've made it abundantly clear that we wanted nothing to do with X39 and we didn't want our daughter to be a part of it. They failed to listen. My wife was on the phone with them for over an hour, and while I don't know the exact length the conversation went to, I know it at least ended with her screaming, "Going to see my fucking daughter again, and if you attempt to come to my house we will call the police." Before hanging up, that was 3 days ago now, and we've had several missed calls from family members, her parents, her siblings, and even family friends, all saying that we overreacted, and they were just trying to help. Maybe we overreacted, but we wanted nothing to do with that, and despite making it clear, they went against our wishes and did it anyway. And instead of giving my daughter actual medication, they tried to give her some placebo patch. Her parents tried claiming that we're stopping them from seeing their only grandchild over something so small. But we did want to hear it. Relevant comments. Comment 1. I kinda think you, Tosh, for leaving your sick baby to go out of town. OP, we didn't leave a sick baby to go out of town. We left her with her grandparents while she was fine. We only packed Motrin because, as I stated in my post, you can never be too careful. She got sick while we were out of town, not before. Comment 2. You say that like it's snake oil, like it's just as bad as the X39. Was it Advil and cough syrup? Or just a generic bottle that you wrote infant medication on? You expect us to believe that you gave them medication just in case she got sick and then she immediately got sick? Come on, this sounds like total BS. OP, her grandparents don't exactly have children medication laying around. We packed her Motrin, which I quite literally stated later in the post had you read it, not some generic bottle, or snake oil, and just as bad. Nor do they have the ability to really go anywhere. They live a good 30-40 minutes outside of any nearby town. The drive to and from her parents is a grand whole hour drive from where we live. And my wife and I quite literally work with sick people all the time. No, I'm not a doctor, nor do we have medical expertise. So my wife and I contracting something is usually pretty high. So we packed Motrin, or whatever the store brand is that we'll buy, every time we left her with her grandparents for more than a day. Update 1. About a month ago I made this post ranting about my in-laws' weird obsession with a, for lack of a better term, cult regarding stem cell regeneration through patches, which clearly isn't a real thing. There's been some development on that end, and while I'm confident things will likely end here, I wanted to give a quick update for those who may have been curious. I'm writing this on the toilet at work, so don't mind the rushiness of it all. After my wife essentially cut ties with them and we all received a million phone calls and text messages from family and friends, things quieted down for about a week or two. We started having my sister watch our daughter instead, when we had to work. We haven't had another out-of-trip town since the initial post, however. Through those couple of weeks we never really heard anything beyond a couple of supposed shit-talking posts on Facebook bitching about us, but I can't seem to find the posts. We thought things were, probably, hopefully, going to end there, but boy were we wrong. And this is quite the jump from the last post. My wife and I were visited by CPS about 2 weeks ago or so, after they received concerning calls about supposed child abuse and negligence within the household. Of course, nothing like that happened, and the caseworker was very quick to see that. We had asked who reported her, and while she couldn't say, we had a suspicion it was from her parents. We were completely helpful and cooperative with the caseworker, and after she left that night, my wife called her mom up and asked her if she's the one who called CPS. Surprisingly, her mother took full accountability, but not so surprisingly, tried to spin it around in her favor, claiming that she did it for our own good because our daughter was sick and she wasn't getting any better, when she was there so clearly we were doing something awful as parents. Kids get sick, it happens, but they're also extreme anti-vaxxers. Not just COVID, I mean everything. From even something as trivial as the flu shot. Yet, they're willing to shill out thousands of dollars for some supposed stem cell regeneration sticker. The fucking hypocrisy and irony in their bullshit is unmatched. My wife didn't really know how to react to that, so she basically told her mom to go fuck herself, and she wants nothing to do with her again. I know I saw a few comments on the last post saying maybe we shouldn't have cut them out entirely, but now I'm starting to question why we didn't cut them out years ago, before our daughter was even a thought in our heads. About a week after the first audit, my mother-in-law showed up to our house on my day off while my wife was at work, and essentially demanded to see our daughter, forcing her way into our home by pushing past my arm. When I told her to get the hell out of my house, she had no business matching in here like that. She essentially told me that I'm unfit to be a parent because I'm depriving my daughter of help she desperately needed, because she's clearly a very sick child. My daughter is perfectly healthy right now, and in fact, has had no stuffy nose and no high temperature. Nothing. I told my MIL straight up that she was batshit insane. I went off on her about how she lied to us, went against our wishes, had the audacity to call and lie to CPS, and then show up at our house unannounced, uninvited, and march herself inside, as well as everything about her X39 LifeWave bullshit. We argued there for a while before I finally got so fed up. I told her to leave my house before I called the police. She stormed out of the house and in true Karen fashion, said, "This isn't over," before slamming my door. I immediately called my wife, who was of course irate. The following morning, we filed a restraining order at the courthouse from her mom and dad, because they're clearly not in their right mindset. The caseworker had to audit us a few more times as per their guidelines over the past 2 weeks, and yesterday was her last day, where she informed us that we're doing good and she's sorry for the trouble they caused. We kept her up to speed on the LifeWave shit, the showing up unannounced and the restraining order, and though she couldn't really take a side, she seemed apologetic. But my wife and I are pretty livid. We started looking at houses in another state to get as far away from her in-laws as possible. Our company has offices out there, so it's entirely possible we could just be transferred. So we're crossing our fingers that all goes well, the restraining order gets filed soon enough, and we'll get a place clear across the country, so that this will hopefully be my last update. New update. Things aren't going to be as juicy in this post as the last two, but some new things have happened, so I'll just jump right in. After my in-laws called CPS on us for no discernible reasons other than we forbid them from seeing our daughter, things mostly quieted down. Some of you suggested that we should do more than just get a restraining order, so we bought some security cameras and had them installed all around our property, and our neighbors, who were pretty good friends of ours, was in the loop for the most part, and anytime we had to go somewhere, not only did we have video cameras recording every time someone entered our driveway displayed directly on our phones, our neighbors kept us updated too. She stopped coming around for the first few months since she called CPS on us, but just the month before last, as we were preparing to move, my in-laws somehow got word we planned on moving states and attempted to block our driveway as her dad tried blocking the front door. Not sure what their plan was there, because we have a back door and an extra side door leading from the kitchen, but I digress. Her mom blocked the driveway, stopping our U-Haul or car from leaving the property, and wouldn't budge, even after we told them we would call the police. They told us they'd move if we told them where we were moving to, but my wife told them that that wasn't happening and they had 10 minutes to leave or we'd be calling the police. My neighbor came over during the commotion, but my in-laws still wouldn't budge. My daughter is crying during all of this as my wife is trying to console her, as my neighbor and I are attempting to remove my father-in-law from the doorway, but he wouldn't move. Eventually my wife called the police, and I'm guessing another neighbor called them as well, because they responded within mere minutes. My in-laws kept screaming that we were taking their rightful grandchild away, and that we'd all be damned to burn in hell for this, but honestly that just made me laugh. The police kept asking them to leave, but they wouldn't. Eventually they were arrested for refusing to leave, and the police were nice enough to call a tow truck for us to be able to back out of the driveway. Lo and behold, as the police were handcuffing my in-laws, they both had on those X39 patches, and even the police questioned them about it. But whatever, what's done is done. We were able to finally leave and on to new adventures. We've been settled in at our new house for the better part of over a month, and we're enjoying it greatly. No word from her in-laws, and they have no idea where we are. We have them blocked, but we'll eventually get messages from unknown numbers or Facebook accounts asking where we moved, but there's no way they're that foolish to believe we'll actually tell them. Luckily, neither my last state or this one have any grandparents' rights, so we're in the clear there. Thank you everyone. Hopefully this is my last update. Relevant comments. Comment 1. Seriously look into a P.O. box and have all mail routed there. OP. Hey there. We actually did get our mail routed to a P.O. box. Comment 2. Why were they not arrested for violating a restraining order? OP. We informed the police they had a restraining order. I just don't think they cared. They were more concerned with getting them off our property as opposed to them violating the restraining order. I think one of their final charges after being arrested was violation of a restraining order, though. The police just didn't seem to care at the time, which is unfortunate, to say the least. Uncovering a decade of secrets. Suspecting my husband fathered his best friend's kids, and now one wants to date our daughter. OOP is married to Luke, who has a girl BFF, Amy, who he claims is like a sister to him. Even after getting married, Luke maintained a very close bond with Amy. OOP has 4 kids. Sophie, 15, Owen, 12, Louise, 10, and Carter, 6. Amy has 4 kids. Tom, 17, Kaylee, 14, and twins, Adam and Jenna, 9. But no one knows who the dad is and has never been in any long-term relationships. All the kids have grown up together and are close. OOP has begun to suspect that Luke has fathered at least one, if not all of Amy's kids. Amy stopped having kids after Luke had a vasectomy. The kids also look like Tom. OOP has turned a blind eye for years, but now Tom wants to date Sophie. OOP is worried they are actually half-siblings, and Tom and Amy also don't want it to happen. Update. The 5th of September 2024, UOOP doesn't try a sneaky DNA test, but confronts Luke and Amy, who deny anything untoward, and Amy refuses to have her kids' DNA tested. Luke's mother also suspects something. OOP and Luke have a big fight and he spends the night at Amy's. Update 2. The 6th of September 2024. OOP confides in Sophie about what she suspects about Tom's real father and is surprised to find out that the kids already suspect this, and the relationship was actually a plan to get things out in the open and force the truth from Luke and Amy. OOP plans to move ahead with a divorce and try to get a DNA test done as well. Update 3. I think my husband fathered his best friend's children, and now one of them is attracted to my daughter. 3 days later. First, a few points to answer from the comments. I don't have any DNA test results back yet. That can take weeks. But now that I know Sophie is in no danger of dating a relative, the pressure is off. I'll get into this momentarily, but it frankly no longer matters if Luke fathered the children. I highly doubt my father-in-law is having an affair with Amy. At worst, he might know, or even just suspect, the truth about Amy and Luke. But it's also possible that he just refuses to believe they would do such a thing. I've been vague about details for privacy, but to put it very simply, Jim and Amy are both pretty white. Kat and Luke are not. Had Jim fathered Amy's babies, they would look different than they do. Nevertheless, I do have an update. While a stream of comments have called me spineless and naive, called me a sister wife, as an ex-Mormon, that hits a particular nerve. And most recently, a stream of comments have said my story is fake. Fair enough, it's the internet. But Luke is not the first scumbag husband to have 2 families. Several other comments have been incredibly kind and supportive, and I really appreciate that. Apologies if I haven't responded to a comment or direct message that you sent. I covered as many as I could, but I was literally getting hundreds, so I definitely missed several of them. First things first. I discussed this in the comments, but our little team has, supposedly, recruited my mother-in-law. I say supposedly, because Sophie and Tom were going to talk to her about getting help with submitting the DNA test, and, at the advice of my lawyer, I am staying out of the process. Officially, I told Sophie not to do it, and she said she wouldn't. MIL hasn't contacted me about it either. Though we have been in touch, I'll get into that more in a moment. The bottom line is that I can honestly say I had no knowledge of any DNA test. Loophole City. Another bit of good news. I was digging through the paperwork in preparation for my divorce, wanting to get a head start against Luke, and one thing that came to my attention is that my name is on the paperwork for our home. Luke's name is not. I was the one who bought the house, and we always planned to add Luke onto the paperwork at some point, but we never got around to it, and eventually the idea was forgotten. It was my lawyer, Paige, who pointed this out to me, and it was like finding a winning lottery ticket on the ground. I don't know where I'd be without Paige. She's a dear friend from college who I reached out to, hat in hand, for help. She's been there for me this past week, not just as legal counsel, but as a friend I really needed right now. The thing is, she's not our lawyer, me and Luke. We have our own family attorney who has helped us out of jams in the past. We clashed with our HOA a few years ago, not worth getting into right now. But Paige is a lawyer who specializes in family law and has handled divorces before. Luke remembers her from college and knows she went into law, but doesn't know she's a divorce attorney. So I can have her over for coffee like we're catching up, and he has no idea anything is going on. Turns out, he's not the only one who can harbor someone under his spouse's nose under the guise of being a friend. So, on to the update. The last time I looked in Luke's phone was 3 months ago, around the point Sophie and Tom began to go around claiming they wanted to date. I found nothing. While I know how to search for recently deleted photos and didn't see any, my comments taught me how to find recently deleted messages. So when Luke was asleep, I did just that. Swiped his phone and brought it downstairs, checked recently deleted. I am glad I did, but I also wish I had not, because I'm still reeling from the pain. Sure enough, a conversation with Amy had been deleted. Recent text talking about the conflict between her and me, with Amy describing me as a problem, and Luke trying to pacify her. Without defending me at all, to be clear. They both alluded to how they had expected this for a while and just hoped it would never happen, presumably me accusing them of having an affair. While the whole conversation and the fact that it was deleted was sketchy, nothing was actually admitted. So I scrolled a bit higher, to a few days before the fight. Amy's messages got a bit more flirty. Then, I saw it. 5 days before I confronted them, Amy had sent Luke a topless pic. A selfie with no shirt or bra. Guys, I teared up. I knew it was true. I knew it in my bones, but seeing the proof still cut me like a hot knife. Doesn't help that Amy's always had bigger breasts than me. I exited the Messages app and checked Luke's recently deleted photos. Sure enough, the same selfie was there, and others. Amy topless, Amy naked, in various poses to show off. There were pictures of the two of them together, cuddled and pressed close like a couple. In some of these she was naked. In some, they both were. There were videos. Amy sent Luke a video message of herself topless, and I had to actually hear her voice talking to him in a tone that made me sick, about how she was sending him a quick video to help him get through the day. In more than one video she called him her boo, and hearing her call him that, I almost vomited. Stopped looking at the point, I'd seen enough. For about 5 minutes anyway, then a strange compulsion to keep searching led me to check Luke's laptop. I knew enough of his passcodes to access his iCloud storage and, yeah, basically more of the same. There were letters, long letters between them. I didn't have the heart to read past the first few lines of one of them, but I did read Luke mention our children. There were countless naked topless selfies of Amy. Selfies of them together. Videos where Amy appeared to be masturbating. There were sex tapes. Of the two of them. Tom had previously offered to try and hide a camera in Amy's room, but fuck, he never needed to. Luke was hiding a whole treasure trove under my nose all along. I scrolled, and scrolled, and scrolled. There were so many. Going back years. Not all of it was even sexual. There were some photos of Amy's kids too. One video was of Kaylee and the twins playing together when they were younger, and Luke and Amy's voices from behind the camera. There were even old pictures of Luke and Amy from when they were younger. I'd even say teenagers. I snapped. All these years, I had been telling myself I had to be wrong, that it couldn't be true. Well, it was true. I know that no one forced me to look at as much of the evidence as I did, but I'm still hurting very badly from having seen it, and in that moment, I wanted to act, so I did. I called my lawyer, who is a remarkable woman. It was the middle of the night, so I had to call her twice, and she picked up. Though I had woken her, when I asked her to come by and said it was an emergency, she agreed. I also asked her to draw up the paperwork and have it ready. She told me that she'd already had it ready since I first reached out to her. As I waited for her, I went through the necessary channels on Luke's laptop to make sure he wouldn't be able to remotely disconnect our access to his little stash, changing passwords and all that. My lawyer, let's call her Paige, arrived, and I went outside to greet her in the car. Spent a good half hour in the passenger seat just crying, and she was great about that, before I passed her Luke's phone and his laptop, with all the information she needed to use them. She warned me that this could be considered theft. So I asked her to forward and print out copies of everything she could and then bring the items back, because I just couldn't bear to do it myself. She agreed. I went back inside, and then I packed up Luke's things while the house slept. At one point Owen got up to use the bathroom and asked me what I was doing, but I told him I was just cleaning. Luke stirred once or twice while I was in the bedroom but did not wake. I got all of his things packed into trash bags and I loaded up the car. That's when I woke him up and told him to come outside. He was confused and half asleep, but he did notice things were missing. I ignored his questions and just told him to come with me. So he followed me outside. Once we were by the car, I pulled out the divorce papers and officially handed them to him. That was about when he figured out what I was doing, and he tried to talk me out of it. Tried to be sweet with me, to be tender. He kept insisting that he loved me and that there had never been anything with Amy. Kept trying to persuade me not to tear our family apart. Even 2 weeks ago, I might have wilted under him because the manipulation and gaslighting were truly masterclass, but I can see through it now. I didn't tell him that I knew he was full of shit. I didn't tell him what I had seen. I just told him we were finished. He tried a different approach. He refused to go. Stated firmly that our children were his too and that even if we were separating, I had no right to just decide the kids would stay with me over him. This was where I very coldly presented the paperwork reminding him that the house is in my name, and told him under no circumstances would my kids be staying with Amy. He argued a while longer, but in the end he decided to be the bigger person and keep the peace. At that moment I didn't care where he went. Before he left, he did ask about his phone and laptop, and I waved him off by saying they were in one of the bags. Bought a little time. I couldn't sleep for the rest of that night. I cried more. Eventually I realized I'd have to wake my children up early and explain to the extent that I could. Naturally, I woke Sophie first. I told her that I had kicked her father out and that I had discovered evidence of an affair on his devices. I did not specify what kind of evidence, and she did not ask. I woke up the others and gently told them that their dad had gone to stay somewhere else for a while. That I wasn't sure where, but from now on things were going to be different. Louise was the one to ask if we were getting divorced, and I couldn't lie to her. I told her yes. Owen asked when they could see their father again, and I wanted to cry. Sophie was a very big help, urging her siblings to be sympathetic to me right now and worry about Dad later. I knew better than to poison them against their father. Paige warned me against doing that as well, so I only told Sophie that the affair was confirmed since she had already been in the know. However, as the kids were getting ready for school, Owen approached me and asked me point blank if it was about Amy. If Luke was going to be with her instead of me. I couldn't answer, but I suppose that's an answer on its own. Got the kids to school, and my next step was calling to have the locks changed. I knew Luke would be back for his devices before long, but thankfully Paige returned with them before he showed up again. It was a very quick visit. She just told me that all was accomplished, and she had records of everything we would need in court. Sure enough, Luke turned up an hour later demanding to know where his laptop and phone were. I had set them back in our bedroom like they had never moved, and I just told him he had forgotten them. He insisted that I had said they were in one of the bags, so I just shrugged him off and told him I must have been mistaken. After he grabbed them, he tried again to reason with me, but I just showed him the door. I knew the kids would start to come home from school before long, and I think he was trying to delay leaving so he could see them. I was not having it. I started shouting again and sent him on his way. I'm still just in absolute pain and despair for what I saw. I don't know if he'll realize that anyone went through his devices and made copies of the evidence, or if he suspects I saw anything, but he obviously didn't say so. After he left, I cried once again. Talked to my mother-in-law that night. Apparently Luke did show up to his parents' house, which was a surprise, as I was so certain he'd stay with Amy. But maybe even he knows how suspicious that would look to the children and doesn't want to rock the boat as much. Maybe he knows I'm more likely to let my children see their grandmother than Amy at this point, and he wants to see them to give his version of events. That is not happening. Kat already shared his version with me, that he relayed to her and Jim. That I'm having some kind of mental breakdown, that he wishes he could help me, but my paranoia is causing me to lash out and turn violent. I was never violent. I shoved him away when he tried to hold me, that is all. And what's so hilarious is that he didn't mention Amy at all to his parents. He didn't even frame it as me falsely believing he was having an affair. Even though that's his story when talking to me, he left Amy out of it when talking to his parents. Kat noticed that. She believes me. Jim doesn't know what to believe anymore. According to Kat, he seemed very, very troubled by what he heard from all sides. As for Amy, she's radio silent. Tom has told Sophie that she's acting like nothing is wrong but is clearly stressed out. That when her children ask, she makes the same sort of claims. That I'm having some kind of emotional nervous breakdown and pushing her away as well as Luke. She doesn't mention anything about my accusing them of an affair, but still puts it all on me. Amy has not reached out to talk to me directly, and I have not tried talking to her since our big argument. I haven't really told my kids anything, just that I'm having disagreements with Luke and Amy, though I was very clear that it is not a question of my mental health. Honestly, I think they all kind of know what's going on. Sophie continues to be my rock, as I try to be for her and the others, and Tom continues to be our spy in the ranks. Right now, my biggest regret is the stress that all of this is causing on the children, which I knew it would, but it still needed to be done. My life has fallen apart. But it was never my life. Comments. Comment 1. Owen asked if it was about Amy. All of your kids must have seen and heard things from them when they thought they weren't being observed. Please get them into counseling soon. You are amazing. Stay strong and calm. That will negate all claims of you having a mental breakdown. You've got this. Comment 2. All the people who talked about keeping the kids together were off their rockers. Her 12-year-old knew there was something wrong, and they had been constantly thrown into a situation that was uncomfortable for them. OP has to start putting her kids first. Comment 3. If this is fiction, nicely done. If this is real, you got this. Comment 4. This is how I feel. There's so much effort put into the story, even if it was made up by her or AI. I'm all in. Comment 5. Oh, OP. I think I was secretly holding out hope that this would all turn out okay. But life is not a fairy tale. It was a very brave thing you did, going through his devices and facing this truth. Kind of like breaking your own heart, you knew what you would find. I'm so proud of you. I can't imagine the strength it took to quietly pack his things while he slept peacefully in bed. Sounds like Luke is a master manipulator. The most recent convo with Amy even talked about knowing this would happen. He had a cover story to explain being kicked out, locked and loaded. Curious to see how he can spin this into your fault once the truth comes out. I would inquire with your attorney about putting in a stipulation in your divorce decree that Amy not be allowed around your children or under the same roof during his custody times. Amy is a vile, disgusting woman, and that's a hill I would be willing to die on. You can't do anything about Luke being around your children, but you can put any kind of stipulation like this built into your divorce decree. Seems you have done everything you could at this point. No matter how difficult it has been, you face the truth, and now you will be able to live the rest of your life without a nagging thought at the back of your mind constantly. Don't stop updating. OOP, life is not a fairy tale indeed. You're right, the nagging worry is at least gone. In a way, I think not finding anything would have been worse, because it would have perpetuated the ambiguity. After talking to Tom, I was all but certain, but it was still possible to be a misunderstanding. That it wasn't true. Now I know for sure. And I hate knowing, but at least the question isn't hanging over me anymore. It's tricky, because them not being allowed to see Amy is going to impact their ability to see their best friends, half-siblings. If being my husband's affair partner was all it took for me to demand she not be allowed to see the kids, I feel like a lot of divorces would have clauses like that, but I never hear about it. I don't want Amy seeing my kids, but I'm not sure how realistic that is. Comment 6. I honestly don't understand why Luke and Amy went through all this trouble. No one was stopping them from being together at the beginning. Why do all this? They're literally psychotic. They're gonna start painting you as a crazy person to your circle. Social media soon. Do you think you can get ahead of the curve and tell people the truth? What? Social media. Without including the photos, videos, but screenshots maybe. Of course only if your lawyer approves. Or at least once the divorce proceedings have started and Luke and Amy knows just how much evidence you have. If not, they're gonna spin the story as you went crazy and divorced Luke and they looked to each other for support and fell in love. I know you think no one will believe that story, but it's important your narrative gets out. New update. 3 days later. In my last post, there were a number of criticisms toward Paige. You guys will like this update, as it turns out, you weren't the only ones who had a problem with her. As far as the deed being in my name, it's not an absolute hook, line and sinker, but Paige is convinced that between that and my having been the one paying the mortgage, I stand a very good chance. It could be interpreted as a common marital property, but I'm going for primary custody with supervised visits anyway. I'm playing hardball. People also questioned whether I should still be posting these, but so long as it's all anonymous, I am in the clear. Doesn't even matter if someone who knows me could figure out I posted this. I didn't use any real names, or reveal my location, or anything like that. As for the laptop, even Paige admitted that was questionable, but technically I gave permission and she was only doing what I could have easily done on my own. I just really didn't want to go through all of that content. As far as the divorce papers, Paige had them filled out after the very first time I contacted her. My serving them to Luke was ceremonial. She still contacted him later to officially serve him and request his lawyer's details. But before he could respond, I had already done something a little sneaky. I reached out to our family attorney, the one who has always been on call to represent me and Luke during our marriage. He helped us out of a jam with the HOA a while back. I'll call him Zach. Now, contrary to some of the comments' suggestions, I cannot just go around town consulting with every lawyer in the area, with the explicit purpose of locking my husband out of hiring them. That is bad faith and judges don't look too kindly on it. However, this was Zach. He had been my attorney, and Luke's, for years. I feel like I had just as much right to him as Luke did. And I got there first. So I was able to nail down our family's lawyer. Met with both him and Paige, and boy howdy, do they not like each other. Zach brought up some of the same problems as some of my comments. He argued that Paige's activity was in the gray area and urged me to hire him to represent me in the divorce instead. That caused a bit of conflict as Paige is explicitly a family attorney and this is her specialization. So I'm going to be consulting both of them from here on out. Zach actually thinks it's a good thing that I made these posts as they can't really do much other than prove my sanity when Luke and Amy try to argue otherwise. Overall, I'm doing better. I've been talking to a friend in real life, the mom of one of Sophie's friends. I also have therapy scheduled for myself, and I intend to look into family therapy as well. When my kids ask me what's going on, I simply tell them that their father and I are having adult problems and it's nothing they need to worry about. That worked for about a day. Sophie warned me they were planning to confront me as a group, and they did, asking if Dad had cheated on me with Amy. Obviously they've been talking about this, and perhaps they have been for longer than I had anticipated. Perhaps they've been wondering? Again, even though I had absolute proof, I was hesitant to tell them as much, and let me explain why. I naturally wouldn't tell them about the pornographic content I found. I would simply say that I found messages between Luke and Amy revealing their affair. But, with the exception of Sophie, they wouldn't be satisfied with that. I already know Carter, curious little sweetheart that he is, would want to see these messages. So instead, when I was asked directly by my kids if their dad had cheated on me, I simply said I believe he did, yes. With as much sincerity as I could muster. I think they believe me. Tom and Sophie are texting nonstop, and from what I can gather, there's doubt among Amy's children as well, that this is about me losing my mind, and not about their mother being too close to my husband. I think it's slowly sinking in for poor Jim that what he didn't want to believe was possible is very much possible, and it's happening. I haven't shown him or Kat any letters or anything. They're hosting Luke, so I haven't had much of any contact with them at all. But I did have one phone call with Kat where we wished each other well. That was nice. In the background, I could hear shouting, and though Kat quickly went outside, I did hear what sounded like Jim shouting at Luke. He doesn't usually shout. He's the calmest man I've ever met. So in a way I'm worried about him, but also relieved that the wool is being pulled off of his eyes. According to Kat, Luke is still staunchly denying everything. He was pretty upset when he found out that I had poached Zach though, which gave me a kind of grim satisfaction. The test results came back. Sophie and Tom tested their DNA against each other to see if they truly are blood siblings. Here's a surprise. According to the test, they're not. They don't share any DNA. To everyone who believed Jim had fathered Amy's babies, here is definitive proof that he did not, because the test would have revealed that too. But I never believed it anyway. Sophie has her doubts and wonders if the results weren't faulty and if we shouldn't take another test to be absolutely certain. But I'm not really worried about that. More confused than anything. I was so certain Tom had to be Luke's son. He was too. Now he doesn't know what to think, and I don't either. I obviously now know the affair happened and lasted years, and I know from the letters that Kaylee is Luke's child. Or at least both he and Amy seem to believe she is, which confirms they were intimate 15 years ago. Now I'm just wondering for Tom's sake. Who if not Luke is his father? He does kind of look like Luke, but that might just be coincidence. In general, everything was quiet for a few days until it wasn't, until she finally showed her face. My best friend Amy. I am so happy I installed Ring cameras everywhere, as you are about to understand. Sure enough, Amy turned up on my doorstep and asked to talk. She had a relaxed demeanor and did not raise her voice. Assuming she was approaching me on Luke's behalf, I told her that I wasn't interested in talking to her and to just go away. She did not leave, but she didn't make a scene either. She persisted in telling me we needed to have a conversation. The kids weren't home, and did have cameras inside. I was also recording her on my phone and being discreet about it, so eventually I relented and let her in. I don't know if she realized she was on camera. We sat down on the couch, and she instantly got into the reason for her visit. Turns out, she and Luke know, or suspect, that I procured damning material from his laptop. Amy accused me of going through his devices and told me that anything I found was not my business and I needed to delete it. That was all she had to say. No apology, no admission of guilt, didn't take responsibility for her own behavior. Hell, she might have known I was recording her, because she didn't even directly acknowledge what the sensitive material on Luke's laptop actually was. So I confronted her, letting out some of my anger. I asked how she could have the nerve to make demands of me. I asked her why she and Luke would do a thing like this in the first place. Why had they seen fit to spend all these years betraying me? I posed the question that I'd been wondering about for a long time, and as I expected, I got no answer. Literally, Amy didn't seem to really hear me even as I confronted her. She seemed like she was stressed, panicked even, but she was keeping it under wraps. She ignored my questions and accusations and just kept telling me to delete whatever content from Luke's laptop that I had. She said that if I wanted to divorce Luke, that was my call, but not to drag her into it. Oh, that made me so mad. I kept my temper, but I did snap back that she was already very much in it. Amy just kept repeating herself, telling me to delete whatever I found. So I just refused. I asked her, point blank, why I should. Why did I have any reason to? Amy got more aggressive, raising her voice. She was trying to intimidate me, but I held my ground. She told me that this wasn't about me, and that I needed to just do as she said. That it was very important. So I asked again, why? And yet again, she would not answer. So I asked her if Luke had sent her to do this or if she had shown up on her own. No answer to that either. It was like talking to a brick wall. So I asked her to leave. Just as I'd been afraid of, she wouldn't go. She refused to leave until I had deleted everything I'd found in front of her. I couldn't help laughing. I told her no, that wasn't going to happen. This is where I could see her starting to freak out more. In another moment, she got up, ran into the other room, and grabbed my laptop. Before I could stop her, she smashed it on the floor. I really don't know why she thought that would work or get her the outcome she wanted. I think she was just panicking. Obviously, I still have everything, except now I need to buy a new laptop. And sadly, her doing this was out of frame of the camera, but it's fine. All of my important files are backed up, and at that moment I was more concerned that Amy would do something else drastic. She looked like she was going to have a breakdown. I tried again, very calmly, to tell her that she needed to leave or I would call the police. She refused again and just kept repeating her demand that I drop this whole cheating angle and divorce Luke without trying to argue that an affair took place. At that point I just stared at her. At the woman I had considered one of my dearest friends in all the world. And I told her that I didn't owe her anything, but she owed her children the truth. That they had the right to know where they came from. Who Luke really was to them. Amy bristled and told me it was none of my business, that I didn't understand her family and I needed to back off. She kept going back to this idea that I could divorce Luke, but I must not claim he'd had an affair with her. I just told her that I didn't need her permission to handle my divorce how I wanted and told her again to leave. She got more and more desperate, and her anger accelerated to the point that she physically attacked me. I did not expect her to actually do this. I'm not much of a fighter, but I do know the human body pretty well, and where it's weakest. She hurt me pretty badly, but I got her off me. That part was very much on camera, and the whole audio was recorded on my phone. She finally left after that, and I immediately called to file a police report. I had the strangest feeling she'd try something similar and wanted to beat her to the punch. I was able to clean myself up by the time I had to face my kids, and while I downplayed the story, I did not lie to them about why I had a black eye. I told them, for their own safety, to steer clear of Amy. I also sent the footage to Paige and Zach, as well as pictures of my injured state before I cleaned up. They've also printed out the letters that reference Kaylee as Luke's child. I really feel like Amy just screwed herself over on all this. I don't know what her motives were. Was she protecting Luke? Was this his idea? Does she just really not want the world to know she's a homewrecker? Is she covering her own ass? As if people didn't know already. The more of my social circle I talk to and inform of the basics, the more people confess that they had wondered in the past if Luke wasn't cheating on me, but didn't have any concrete proof. I suppose Amy doesn't want her kids to know who fathered them, which does line up, but I'm still not sure about Tom. I didn't ask Amy about him in particular. I don't know why you guys are so eager for these updates, but I don't mind posting them. I've never blogged about my life before. I'd imagine it feels something like this. Comments. Comment 1. I'm so sorry that she had gone to your home and attacked you. Glad you still have the evidence and didn't back down. I have a feeling that she is wanting you to delete the stuff because maybe your in-laws have threatened to cut her off financially if it is true. Thank you for the update. Hope you're healing. OOP. I could see that being the case. Comment 2. Oh, to be a fly on the wall when Luke finds out that the children he thought were his actually belong to someone else and that his mistress has been cheating on him for years. It would be so, satisfying. He will lose not only his wife and mistress but also some of his children. Not to mention losing the respect of the children he had with you. He's headed straight for the downfall. Comment 3. Ooh, I had not considered this angle. How interesting. Another poster said they thought Amy might be so insistent that she'd be left out of everything because the in-laws will cut her off. And I still think that's a strong possibility, but even more so if the kids aren't actually Luke's. Comment 4. Sweet life. Amy has bought herself a house with these people's help and receives regular financial support every month. She has hooked a sick man who struggles to leave the house, according to one of OP's comments, and made him her puppet. Even if Luke suspects something, he can't confront Amy, because if he does, Amy could spill everything. She's been in control of the narrative until now, and suddenly the whole world she's built is going to be turned upside down. I think that's why she's freaking out. There's also being humiliated, yes, but she can always leave the city she lives in. Hell, even the country. But as long as the children are the grandchildren of this rich family. But if they're not, she's fucked. Comment 5. What DNA test did the kids use? That was super fast. Amy sounds like she has mental problems. No accountability for her actions. Zero remorse. No empathy. She thinks she can't do any wrong. Sue her for the laptop and press charges for battery or assault. OOP. Literally just one of the over-the-counter paternity tests you can buy at a drugstore. If it gets to the point of having tests done in court, those are likely to be more reliable. Oh, you read my mind. Kind stranger, that's exactly what I want to do. Laptop is likely to just be a small claims court, but it's another charge on the pile. Am I the A for renting my house to a friend with poor financial habits? Now, she's offering to buy the house for a ridiculously low price, even just $1. Some backstory. I, 31, grew up pretty poor. I don't remember it well, but at one point my parents and I were only able to afford to eat beans and rice. My parents have since been able to pull out of poverty, and while they aren't rich, they are comfortable. And I have used a lot of what I experienced as a kid as motivation to be super careful with my money. I got a job in high school, worked odd jobs on the side, saved up every penny, rode my bike everywhere instead of driving and paying for gas, and by the time I moved out of my parents' place, I had a little over $17K in my savings. I don't have that much tucked away anymore, but I have investments and emergency funds and take my family's finances incredibly seriously, as I never want my children to experience what I did as a kid. Mine and my husband's financial choices afforded us the opportunity to purchase a home in the beginning of 2015, which we bought 50/50 with his mother. He paid his half up front. I made a large down payment, and his mother covered the rest with an escrow agreement that I would pay off what she had purchased. I have since completely paid my half, and the house is fully owned by myself and my husband. It's a 4-bedroom, 1 and a 1/2 bath, 2-story home with a finished basement, attached 2-car garage, on a double lot. We got the house for an absolute steal at only $118K, for sale by owners. Since purchasing, we have installed a fence, updated the oven, washer and dryer, water heater, furnace, and paid for materials to have all the interior rooms repainted. The only updates it needs are purely cosmetic, as the exterior paint is an ugly brown pink color, which we have started repainting and need to finish. The hardwood floors have some distortion due to it being a 100-plus-year-old house and us having dogs when we live there. And the bathroom could use an update, but structurally speaking doesn't need one. Needless to say, on a scale of 1-5, with 1 being tear down the house and start over, and 5 being it's ready to put on the market to sell for $300K today, the house is sitting at a 3.5 on a 4. Backstory complete, let's get into what has become my biggest headache for the past 4 years. I have a friend, let's call her Carly, 27, who had incredibly similar experiences to me growing up, but struggles with finances and has never seemed to get the hang of keeping any sort of savings over $50 at a time. I'm not sure if it's a lack of self-control, or that she's simply too focused in the moment when she gets paid and doesn't think to look in the long term, but she consistently makes her lack of funds everyone else's problem. I don't blame her for having issues with money, as learning to create a budget isn't exactly taught in school, and it took me years to learn to find a healthy balance, and the freedom of being able to buy whatever you want with no restrictions is super tempting, but at some point you have to learn to take responsibility. During the course of our friendship, I have helped her build countless budgets based on my own. I made roughly the same amount of money as her, but each time they failed for whatever reason. We tried different ways to try to trick her brain into realizing that money sitting in her account wasn't to be touched, as everything needed to be used for bills, etc., and each time she would wind up still using every penny. It finally came to the point where I refused to help her with her budget anymore, because she never listens to my advice, and when I pointed out the easiest and fastest method to get her spending under control was to get a payee, she said she didn't need to be treated like a child who receives an allowance. Fair enough. I washed my hands of that topic. Carly moved out of her mom's house a little over 6 years ago and into a mutual friend's place. Let's call her Tia, 27. As far as I have been told by Tia, Carly paid little to nothing in rent, even though they both worked at the same company and made close to the same salary. Carly's living space was an absolute disaster. She moved into the basement, and it was lucky if there was even a walkway to get to the washer and dryer. She constantly asked me to come over to help her clean and organize her space, and because I'm a people pleaser, I would always agree. Each time we would make significant progress, but then by the next weekend when I would come over to help again, it was as if a tornado had gone through her space in the course of the week. I have no idea how she was able to fit so much stuff into that tiny space. She would never clean up on her own or make any sort of effort to put anything away, and would always wait for me to come over. And if anyone were to come down to watch us, it was always me cleaning or organizing while she sat back and dictated where everything went. Getting her to donate or throw anything away was like pulling teeth, as somehow even the smallest scrap of paper had some sort of sentimental value. After a little over a year of them living together, Tia couldn't handle it anymore and asked Carly to find some other living situation. She wasn't going to throw her onto the street, but she literally couldn't live with Carly any longer. There are a lot of other things that built up that caused this, but I won't go into that here. It just so happened that my husband and I had purchased a second home around this same time. What we had owed on the first was paid off. My husband had come into an inheritance, and we were able to look for our forever home that better fit our wants and needs. The best part for us is that the new house was literally a 5-minute drive from the old house. We had yet to decide whether we wanted to sell or rent our first house when Carly approached us with the offer of renting it from us. She and 2 other friends were looking to move in together, and with the house being as big as it was, there was plenty of space for all of them to have their own room and privacy. Since we hadn't yet decided if we wanted to sell, and there were 3 renters already lined up, we decided to use it as a means of passive income to invest in our future, and then down the road we would revisit whether or not we wanted to sell it or keep it as a rental. The red flag that I didn't initially pick up on was that Carly was already referring to the house as her house, to her 2 potential roommates even before moving in or signing a lease, so by the time it came to them all moving in, Carly had driven the other 2 girls to back out. The way I had written the original lease agreement was that the rent was flexible depending on how many tenants there were, so for the 3 of them they would have only been paying $750 total per month, and if only one person was renting it would be $400 per month. In this area you can expect to rent a bedroom for $400, so this was a crazy good deal as we really didn't need the money and it was mainly to pay for insurance, power, heat, and property taxes. In the 4 years that Carly has lived in that house, rent has gone up 4 times. Once to $500 a month because the power bill went up and we needed to adjust for that, the second time to $550 a month due to the same reason, the third time to $750 after she got a new job, and last year in October. More on that later. Also in the 4 years she has lived here, 2 separate opportunities for roommates have backed out. Each time because she was setting the rules and referring to the property as her house, despite having 0 claim to it and the fact that each person would have their own lease agreement. When she first moved in she was working a minimum wage paying job and she was my friend, hence the low monthly rent, but a year and a half ago got a new job at a local university, 30-minute drive away, that pays very well and has great benefits, but somehow she manages to blow through her entire paycheck on I don't even know what. Also during the course of these past 4 years she wound up owing me $750 in back rent as she repeatedly was unable to pay me the full monthly amount due to repeated miscalculations in her budget and overspending on garbage, which she then stuffed into mine and my husband's property. My husband and I realized after a couple years of being landlords that we aren't cut out for it. We have too much on our own plates and had no time for upkeep, and Carly wasn't holding up her end of the rental agreement that she had signed. We talked about it and settled on the decision to sell. But we of course didn't want to throw Carly onto the street and informed her of our plan. She proposed to buy it from us and started going through the route of getting a loan. During this process she realized that the house wasn't what she wanted. She wanted land and the house itself was far too big for her. She told us that, and we understood, and I even helped drive her to meet with realtors so she could check out other options to buy houses elsewhere. But each one fell through as she discovered that she wasn't going to get a new homeowner's discount or bargain with any loans that she looked at, and all of the loans required a minimum of a 10% down payment, which she of course didn't have. This is where the entitlement starts. Carly wasn't going to be able to buy a home, at least not the home she wanted, and settled on buy our house. We had briefly talked at the very beginning of her tenancy that we may consider a rent-to-own situation, but no agreement had been made. No sale price had been decided, no appraisals or property inspections completed, nothing had been signed. It was simply a comment that we had made in passing and then chatted about later, again in passing. She took it as gospel truth and said that if she bought the house that she expected the 2.5 years of rent she had paid us to be computed off the total sale of the house. I reminded her that we never signed anything about a rent-to-own and informed her that wasn't how this was going to work. Her next tactic was to try to suggest that we quit claim deed the property to her, again without her paying us anything additional to the 2.5 years worth of rent she had already paid us. How this works is that whoever owns the property grants the title deed to whoever they're giving it to, and it's generally a lot faster and cheaper than going through the process of buying a house, but there is still generally something paid for the property when the title is transferred. At this point she'd only paid about $10K in rent, more than half of which went to paying for utilities that we covered instead of having her pay them in property taxes, and she was making it sound as if she wasn't going to give us anything beyond that. I again told her that this would not be a viable option. The house was in great condition, and even with the exterior paint and repairs to the floors and bathroom was worth at least what we had paid for it. $118K. She tried to spin it that she was doing us a favor by taking it off our hands, as I had expressed to her that we were tired of being landlords and it was more effort than we had time for. Her last attempt at buying the house on her own was to offer me $1. That's right, a single dollar. I will admit I don't know if this was a failed joke attempt on her part, but it certainly fell flat and I was so mad I was shaking, though I laughed it off. Side note, during the time she has lived in the house, my husband and I have some stuff stored in the garage, as Carly parked on the street due to convenience. and she suggested on multiple occasions that she start charging us rent for storing things in our own house when none of it was in her way whatsoever, and we had already made it clear that if she purchased the house that we would remove all of our property. At the end of 2022, Carly started dating Reggie, 28M. They were long distance and would take turns visiting each other. And Carly made the comment to Reggie that we were looking to sell the house, and we threw out a couple numbers, the very lowest being $100K, but said that we of course would have to have an appraisal and look at market value, etc. He offered to buy it from us and said that he would start the process in March-April of 2023. I was relieved, my husband was relieved, Carly was relieved, everything was looking great. Some information about Reggie at the time. He is a retired Marine. He gets a monthly check from the government for close to $2,000 on top of his well-paying job. I'm guessing based on what Carly told me, but at the time he made his offer he was probably making between $4,500 $5,000 a month. When March or April came around, Carly and Reggie informed us that he would not be able to afford paying both his rent where he lived and a monthly mortgage payment and wouldn't be able to start the purchase process then, but would start the purchase process in October instead when he planned to move in with Carly. Before Reggie moved in, an ex-friend offered to rent a room in the house from Carly and pay her despite subletting being clearly stated in the lease agreement as prohibited. Carly so generously offered to pay us some of the amount that she was paid. The agreement fell through and the friend did not stay in the room. I'm not exactly sure why he chose to do things the way he did, but Reggie didn't start the purchase process at all until after he had moved and quit his job, meaning the only source of income he had to show to a mortgage company was the monthly stipend from the government, which even with a veteran's loan doesn't work as proof of income. When he moved in, rent increased to $1,000 a month, which is still undervalued for the size of the home, and a brand new rental agreement was written and signed stating that if they had not started the buying process to purchase the house from us by mid-April of 2024 that we would not be renewing the lease, nor would we work with them on month-to-month rental options, as myself and my husband are completely and totally over this mess. We also stated in the rental agreement that we were not going to list the house for sale as a sign of good faith to allow Reggie and Carly first choice on the house to buy it. Here's a rapid-fire list of things that have happened since October. Reggie paid the $750 that Carly owed to me in back rent. Carly and Reggie informed us at some point either late November or early December that they would not be buying the house as the repairs required amounted to more than $50K. I don't know where they got this number, as I have budgeted on multiple occasions to redo the flooring and it would be less than $15K to redo the entire house, nor would repainting cost more than a few thousand, or the bathroom remodel, as they intended to do the work themselves. We repaired the major damage in the bathroom recently for less than $500. They could not acquire rental housing due to having 3 cats and will indeed be staying in the house. We informed them we are not renewing the lease and reiterated our reasoning. I made the mistake of telling Carly what we owed on our mortgage and they turned around and offered us $50K to buy the house from us, less than 1/3 the market value of the house if we sold it as is. We politely declined and then promptly went home and screamed into pillows. They have repeatedly told Tia that they are desperate for money to the point of debating setting up a GoFundMe, all the while Carly has gotten 2 brand new tattoos in the past year and has an international trip she has paid for in full that she is going on at the end of March, and Reggie has still not acquired even a part-time job. We emergency installed a water heater that Reggie paid for that I will have fully paid back by the end of March. Carly quit her job and now the only income they will have after the end of this week is Reggie's military stipend. Carly nonchalantly stated that we would have to renegotiate rent for this month and next month. There will be no negotiations. She made a bad decision and will have to live with the consequences of her actions. The most recent thing she did was text me 2 days ago asking if she could pay me in food for this month's rent. Knowing her, the amount she will pay will amount to only a couple meals and maybe $75 in groceries instead of the roughly $500 that they will owe. I owe Reggie roughly $500 left to pay off the last bit of the water heater. I jokingly answered that the electricity and insurance companies don't accept food as payment, so neither can I. She then offered to pay me what it would cost to pay these expenses and then the rest she would pay in food. I have not responded. It's been a day and a half. They will pay me in cash and nothing else. I'm done. No discussion. My warning to all of you, don't mix business and friends without getting to know said friends very well first. If I had known what I would be walking into, I never would have allowed her to move it. Relevant comments. Comment 1. Why are you allowing her to dictate anything? Evict her. OP. I'd love to, but where we live requires 60 days notice and that gives them an in to stay past their lease. They conveniently dropped the news on me that she quit her job when it was too late for me to give the required time for written eviction notice. Comment 2. Have you been inside the house since these 2 freeloaders moved in? I am thinking that they may have destroyed some parts of the house, which is why they came up with the 50K in repairs. Let them know that either they get all their crap out or you will just put it out for the trash. If it is worth anything, you could sell it for some of the money that they owe you, but I would bet most of the stuff is just crap. If they don't move out when you say the contract is over, it is 100% time to evict them. But if that happens, check with a lawyer and see if you can cut off all utilities, water, electricity, gas, and any other utility. You want them out before they destroy the inside of the house. If they do, make sure to take pictures and put them on social media and let every one of your friends know exactly what she did. Make sure that no other friend is dumb enough to let them move in with them. OP, luckily I have been inside the house. I was there on Sunday and was able to do a quick walkthrough and everything seems to be okay right now. But I'll keep that in mind for when we deliver the eviction letter update 1. I should clarify. The reason we let Carly move in the first place is because she made it sound like she literally had nowhere to go. She'd spun a tale that her home life with her mom was not safe. Untrue. She made it sound like Tia was literally kicking her out that day. Also untrue, and she panickedly hounded me relentlessly in person and over the phone until my husband and I made a super quick decision to let her rent from us. I've learned this is a method of manipulation. I've reached out to an attorney. We talked about everything that's happened. They read through the lease and gave us a few options. We wait until May 1st when Carly and Reggie are supposed to be out of the house. If they're not out, delivery intent to sell notice. That gives them 90 days to vacate the property after the lease is up. Not ideal. We deliver the intent to sell now. That means they have until mid-June to GTFO. Still not ideal, but better. If they're still in the house past the 90 days, we file an unlawful detainer and the cops forcibly kick them out. We can't evict because we don't have the grounds. Even with all of this, the courts just about everywhere are against landlords and in favor of tenants. The minute their rent is late, we then have grounds for eviction. That gives them 14 days to pay or GTFO. But if they pay, the eviction process ends. So still not ideal. They can't get squatters' rights because they haven't been here long enough. I'm going to be telling her mother everything she's done, because I'm pretty sure she has no idea. I'm also telling all our mutual friends. I've done a lot of self-reflection lately before writing this post and came to several conclusions. I know she's not my friend. I had a false idea that I was helping someone that I saw as a friend, and in the end I enabled her shitty behavior. I'm aware I'm a doormat. I know I don't know how to set boundaries. I spent a lot of time on the phone and in professional offices over the last few days. I'm on a waiting list to see a therapist and learn to set boundaries, because I don't ever want to teach my kids my bad behaviors and habits that got me into this mess. And for all of you who mentioned that it is a miracle my husband is still with me, he was with me along the whole process. I never did anything without his consent, since we own the house 50/50. I'm taking most of the blame because Carly was my friend. I apologized to him and we had a deep conversation about working on communication. He apologized for not seeing that my friend wasn't who she claimed to be and didn't warn me I was being manipulated. Update 2. This is hopefully the last update. Sorry it took so long to get back on here. They're out and have been since April 1st, and no, it wasn't a joke despite the date. Life's been insane and I've been so overwhelmed with this whole situation that it's been hard to get back on here and face it all again. They left the house a mess, but that's not surprising. They claimed they didn't have the time or money to finish even though there was a whole month left on their lease. Honestly, I'm happy that they're out, though I am pissed about the mess. I'd rather clean up a bit instead of fighting them in court to kick them out. I told her mom and showed her everything. And her mom was angry as well and told her off a couple times for 1, leaving the house in the state they did, and 2, treating me, and others, the way she has. I've also started therapy and am working on setting boundaries and getting over my people-pleasing. The last I spoke to Carly was yesterday because I learned from a friend that she joked about leaving the house a mess on purpose because she was mad at me. I confronted her and asked why, even if it was a joke, because even jokes have some basis in truth. She said that it was because emotions were running high and she was stressed at the end when they were getting ready to leave, that she was frustrated with how little I did with the house while she was there, despite me repairing everything that needed it ASAP, and she was mad my husband and I stored some of our things in the garage. I explained that 1, it's our house, we can do that. 2, there was plenty of space in the garage for her things as well, and 3, none of her vehicles would have fit in the garage anyway as they were all too long and none of them ran, so she couldn't have even gotten them into the garage. Carly also had to junk out 2 of the vehicles she left behind, even though she'd explained she had someone who could keep them on their property so she could work on them. I don't understand any of her logic. I'm done trying to figure it out. Last thing she said to me was that she was sorry. though I don't believe she genuinely is and is just saying it to make herself feel better. Thanks to everyone that's read and commented and given advice. It's been greatly appreciated. Sorry if it's a bit anticlimactic of an ending, but I'm relieved that it's done. Some good news is that we're working with a buyer now and are making steps towards selling for what the place is actually worth. I found out my daughter is pregnant. Am I a bad mom for refusing to raise the soon-to-be-born child of my non-binary daughter? My daughter came to me at 16 and said she was non-binary, but only sometimes. Like, some days she would feel more male than female, and some days she would feel like neither. She wanted me to ask her every day what day it was and then refer to her as that pronoun of the day. I told her that wasn't going to fly. Growing up, I spent a lot of time on LJ, LiveJournal, during the old Bun Self and Zen Self Seer Self days. People who think this is new to this generation are fooling themselves. I told her that I would call her the pronoun she wanted and do my best to remember it day to day, but she was going to have to tell me what she wanted for that day. I wasn't going to play a daily guessing game. This went on for about a week or two until she finally seemed to grow tired or bored and just said I could call her her. Though she still identifies as non-binary. Fine. At least when it was going on she wanted she, he, or they. I'm sorry, but I couldn't have done fox self/fox them with a straight face. So that's the pronoun story, and looking back where I think things started to go off the handle. Here's my real question. My daughter is now 18, pregnant, and seems to have lost her goddamn mind. Or I'm an asshole. You choose. This year has been a struggle. She wanted to take a break year before she goes to community college, but can't keep a job. Apparently, retail situations are too phobic against her non-binary state. My child looks/acts/dresses exactly as a young adult female BTW. When I ask how people are being phobic against her, she gets as prickly as a cactus, so I really don't know the details. She's been through 4 or 5 jobs this year, quit all of them. She won't consider call centers that aren't face-to-face because she doesn't like to talk on phones, and is apparently looking for a remote job without any luck. She's been unemployed since Thanksgiving. She quit her last job on Black Friday, in fact, and I was on the verge of laying down the law, telling her she either needs to go to school this upcoming semester full-time or get a full-time job or move out with her friends. But now she's come to me and she's 5 months pregnant. She's very angry at me, says it's my fault because I didn't put her on puberty-blocking hormones when she came to me 2 years ago. She believes I'm in fact trying to feminize her by getting her birth control. The pill. She's been throwing her prescription away. This is where I might be the asshole. I called her a little idiot. We don't use that sort of language in my house, and I never call people names, especially my own child, but at that moment I could just see red. The hormone thing is a non-issue IMO because this is the first time I ever heard of her wanting hormones. What was I supposed to do? Go back in time? As for birth control, it's also the first time I'm hearing anything about this. There are non-pill options that don't have estrogen. If that was her want, all she had to do was ask and I would have driven her to the doctor myself. Or she could have taken the car she has and done it. She has her own medical card even. Though to be fair, I don't know how she would have managed the copay without a job. I know for a fact her old high school gave out free condoms like candy because her friends were always giggling over flavored sample packs, and even blew a few of them up like balloons and left them around the house one time. She had all the birth control she could ever want and used none of it. It gets worse. We're way past the date of abortion. Again, I would have helped her if this had been her wish. We live in an abortion-protected state and can afford it. She's known she was pregnant for about 2 months and has come to think of her baby like a sibling. She expects me to raise it like it was mine. That this is my duty, in fact, because she says it is my refusal to accept her non-binary state that led to her being pregnant. So she was going to get a brother or sister and I was going to have another child. You can say my language grew, sterner versions of get your head out of your ass, and congratulations mommy, you have some hard decisions to make, and I said I would absolutely not raise her baby for her. She also refused to say who the father was. Now that I've cooled down, I'm really hoping she has a secret boyfriend. She does have some friends who were born male, but now also don't identify that way. We didn't even get there as I lost my mind when she said she thinks of her own baby as a sibling and wants me to raise it like my own child. She's locked herself in her room loudly wailing, I feel like crap warmed over. She's been in there for 12 hours, and as she has an attached bathroom, probably won't be coming out until she gets hungry. Considering it's been half a day, I think she has snacks stored. I also don't know where to go from here. Being pregnant sucks and messes with your head, so I'd like to blame that and the fear she must be feeling, but I have the bad feeling I either raised a spoiled brat or someone with an emerging personality disorder. So I need to know from people who aren't emotionally involved, and maybe some people who are more in tune with this whole non-binary thing than I am. What do I do to help while also making her responsible for her own child? How can I help my daughter except she must do basically the most feminine thing you can do, give birth and possibly breastfeed, while being sensitive that she's non-binary? Am I just a big asshole here? Typing all this out, it feels like my daughter is lost in a crazy town. I'm still not raising her baby, but at what point do I drag a legal adult to the hospital? Edit. You might disagree with my choices or wording, but I'm reporting people who call this bait. It's not. Edit 2. It's the middle of the night and she has decided to pack some of her clothes and stay with one of her friends. One who I suspect is the baby daddy. Before she left, she told me that she already called the police and let them know that she was leaving of her own free will and was not in danger. Like I was going to report an 18-year-old adult as a runaway or something. It was insulting. I told her she needs to work out details if she wants to adopt with the father, and she was welcome back home when she had a plan in place. It was short because I heard her on the way out. I think she just meant to leave without saying anything. Thank you for your kind comments and advice, Reddit. I'm going to sleep. Commenters agreed that OP's child wasn't thinking straight. Comment 1. I hate to say this, but I sincerely hope OP's daughter chooses to give up this baby for adoption, because she's a confused hot-ass mess. I don't blame OP for not wanting to step on the crazy train and raise this baby. Comment 2. Let's be honest, if OP says yes to raising this child as her own, it will be the first of several. Daughter won't take BC, so she will continue to have unprotected sex and get pregnant. She decided a couple years ago that she's NB, expected her mother to understand that and know everything about it, and is now rewriting history to blame her mom for her now being pregnant. My head is swimming, and she's not my daughter. There will be more babies. Comment 3. You are so NTA. I feel sympathy for your kid because they sound like they are so confused, maybe have body dysphoria and are now facing a life-altering situation with no way out. They must feel so trapped. So they turn on you. It's easier for them to yell at and blame you instead of accepting responsibility. They are looking for a way out. We all keep changing and growing, and your kid is so young they seem to not know who they are yet, and now they have to face looking after a baby when they know deep down they can't even really take care of themselves. But my God, the thing they did that was really stupid was chucking BC away. That is actually wild. Your kid needs to learn the difference between gender-enforced stereotypes and actual biology. With biology, it unfortunately doesn't matter what gender you are, the biology doesn't care. It still works the same. They need to learn that and differentiate. Like I said, NTAOP. What a shit situation. I hope it gets better. I really do. Comment 4. NTA. Your child is in fact a little idiot, with behavior that would be an absolute nightmare had you not been their parent. Also, birth control isn't a form of feminization. It's a form of responsibility when you're born in a body with a uterus and want to have sex that can result in pregnancy. OP's response, I wish I had those words when she hit me with that one. I sort of sputtered for a few minutes. Comment 5. Oh man, this is a can of worms within itself. I wish I had better advice, but just... I feel for you in the position you're stuck in. The only thing I can think of is, referring to breastfeeding as chest feeding might make your NB daughter accept it more. But like, there's a whole other level of things you need to get through first. First and foremost, therapy, ASAP for your kid. Because she needs to get her head sorted out. Assuming you will just take this kid and raise it for her is problematic to say the least. And she's got a deadline coming obviously, so therapy ASAP. Also appointment for pregnancy checkups ASAP. Has she had any? An unmonitored pregnancy can lead to complications. You might also be able to get her a social worker to go through pregnancy checkups, birthing extra. Your kid needs a big sit-down conversation about accountability for your own actions, and about how she might feel like part of your actions lead to this. There was also many choices she could have made to prevent this, that she chose not to. And at the end of the day, it was her choices that led to this, not you. OP's response. Thanks for this tip. I've written it down. The reason I mentioned she was NB because using breast instead of chest is the exact type of thing to send her into a pissy fit when she's in the wrong mood. I know this may sound like a little thing, but she's always been, well, dramatic. Because it's the internet and things are anonymous, I'll admit that I am absolutely dreading pregnancy and afterbirth mood swings. Especially since it will all involve very womanly things in every intimate way. On top of the sheer stress of a newborn? Yes, I'm not looking forward to it at all, and am already preparing to endure the storms. Our conversation wasn't productive, It was an argument and she's still not out of her room, but I don't think she has had any prenatal care. That will change if I have anything to do with it. Thanks again. OP commented with some of her concerns. Yes. My worry and regret have so many places to go, and a big part of it is for the baby. This has been a bad day. Responding to a comment regarding her child's entitled attitude. Oh, believe you me, I have been kicking myself up and down on top of everything else. I don't know how she got to this point, but she's there now. I wish I did have that time travel machine she clearly expects me to have. She also clarified her overall views on the matter. I'm on the fence. If she acted at all like she didn't have a gender, I believe that's what NB is, then I could take it more seriously. But she dresses as a woman. She puts on makeup, wears dresses during the summer, enjoys feminine things. We watch horse videos on YouTube and squeal over the new foal videos. She's never been a tomboy, even. But I was like, okay, this isn't hurting her. I'll let her have this and express herself. Maybe it'll turn into something, maybe it won't. And after the first few weeks, she even dropped changing pronouns every day. Her mentioning being NB faded and then started up hard again when high school ended and she started working retail. I try to be understanding. Retail is hell, and I'd personally only work it again if I was at my last resort, but recently it does seem to be an excuse not to work, and now she has a baby on the way. This may not be the place for it, but I'm just worried she's regressing to a more childlike state. I don't know if she's struggling with being NB or if she's using NB as an excuse to shield herself from the world. I guess the internet won't know, but I'm just flat out worried. Update. This is an update to this post. Long story short, my 18-year-old NB daughter wanted me to raise her baby, and she told me she thinks of the baby as her sibling. We had a blowout. She locked herself in her room for most of a day and then took off with her friends, her lover. So this happened a few days ago, but I didn't update because I needed to get my head around it. It still doesn't make sense. Daughter finally unblocked me. She and the person who got her pregnant wanted to talk to me at a public place. We chose IHOP. Although I suspected I knew who her lover was, I was disappointed to find out because they have been a part of my daughter's friend group since high school and was the only one I ever had a problem with and kicked out of my house. They are trans now, but 2 years ago the friend group was watching a movie in the living room, and every time I'd pass by, he was a he then, would lock eyes with me and make really obnoxious, loud orgasm sounds like that scene in Harry Met Sally. I told him to knock it off and grew sterner when he did it again. Then when I was in the kitchen, he somehow snuck up behind me and was miming jack-off movements with his hand. I turned around and caught him at it. He was still fully clothed, but it was startling and freaky. I kicked him out. So now I'll just call them sperm donor because that's what they are. I'm still calling my daughter and she because I still haven't been told not to by her otherwise. So get off my case on that. Anyway, the IHOP meeting was a shit show. Sperm donor sat with my daughter and went on the attack. Sperm donor's points were, I was poisoning my daughter by making her take birth control. I only helped her get the prescription and would have done everything I could if I knew she didn't want to take the pill. There are other methods. It will take years to fix my daughter after all I did. Not giving her hormones even though I had no idea that was what she wanted. She dropped out, even wanting to change her pronouns after a few weeks. Abortion is a sin and I'm a monster for suggesting it. It's past the date anyway. I am further abusing her by not taking care of the baby while she fixes herself. I guess they meant it as a temp situation, which was also new to me. So apparently, even though I'm an abusive monster, a bad mother and so on, I'm even worse for not taking in their baby. At least no one suggested that I raise it like my daughter's sister anymore. That might have been my daughter's thought on it. Sperm donor did most of the talking while my daughter just sat and glared at me, nodding along. It was kind of a whirlwind. Sperm donor pounded the table a few times, and even the waiter knew not to bother us after drinks, LOL. I'm surprised we weren't asked to leave. There was a lot said, mostly by the sperm donor who really seemed to be steering the ship. I asked why the sperm donor couldn't take care of the baby, and the sperm donor said their parents were even worse than me. I guess my daughter and sperm donor taking care of the child they created is out of the question. I told them that I would not be raising their baby for them and that adoption is the best bet. They said that if I don't agree to raise it, they'll make sure I'll never see the baby ever. I won't raise their child for them. So that's that, I guess. I feel so many flavors of worried and angry and then worried all over again. I've been around the block and it's never a great sign when the person you're with makes an enemy of your family. That's what sperm donor has done by painting me as an abuser and failed mother who also won't take in their baby. Sounds like sperm donors have cut themselves off from their own family too. So I'm worried my daughter is in a very controlling relationship with someone who convinced her to stop birth control because they think hormones are too feminizing somehow and that she needs to be fixed. But they still want me to raise their baby. I'm angry that my daughter can just hear this crap and nod along like, yeah, that makes total sense. She is not stupid. I think she's love blinded. I'm sad and worried for the baby. A couple commenters suggested I wanted nothing to do with the baby because I wouldn't agree to raise it as my own. No, in a perfect world, I would want a normal grandmotherly relationship. Or at least know that the child is safe and has been adopted into a loving family. I don't care what my daughter does with her gender or her body as long as she doesn't hurt herself. I want her to be in a happy relationship with someone who values her for who she is. Sperm donor kept using the word fix, which I see as another terrible sign. It's bad all around. My house is empty. It feels like my adult daughter has run off to join up with some weird church cult thing who tells her that up is down. That not using birth control and not getting an abortion and then expecting others to take care of the child is all a-okay. Oh, and that she's a problem and needs to be fixed. I texted her and said I would be there for her, but sperm donors was still not welcome in the house. I think I'm blocked again. She's a legal adult. I'm not sure what else I can do at this point. In my low points, part of me thinks maybe I should agree to take the baby and then immediately make sure it's adopted into a loving home. But I get the feeling that sperm donors won't make that easy, and right now my daughter does what he says. Also, I'm not sure if that plan is even possible. It sounds like Hollywood. I have an appointment to speak with a counselor, but the soonest I could get is April. Some of my friends think I should take the baby in either to get them away from the parents or because they think it's my duty, or both. The only silver lining in this was that they both seem sober. I don't think there's drugs involved. Am I reading this wrong? Am I the asshole here? Commenters agreed that sperm donors' comments made no sense, and that OP's child was probably stuck in an abusive relationship. Comment 1. For your safety, I would change the locks and put up a camera. Sperm donor seems unhinged. I'm a firm believer in better safe than sorry. Comment 2. This baby will be used as a pawn in his never-ending psychodrama. If they do not and cannot raise their baby, the best solution is adoption. Otherwise, the father will make your life a living hell. OP's response. I couldn't figure out a polite way of saying this, but yes. That is my suspicion if I take in their baby. Sperm donor implied it would be temporary, while earlier my daughter said it would be permanent. I think sperm donors will refuse to sign over paperwork when the time comes or try to leverage it in some way. Comment 3. NTA. Also, it sounds like your daughter is in an abusive relationship with this person. Sorry your daughter has been brainwashed by this crazy person. I would definitely contact this sperm donor's family, and if they seem sane, warn them about how crazy both of them spoke to you. OP's response. That is my fear and not a bad idea to contact sperm donor's parents. This has all happened so far. I feel like I'm in shock and I'm very worried. Comment 4. Pretty wild that a trans person is saying abortion is a sin. None of this is anything like what you're going to hear from any healthy LGBT community, who are quite careful to make sure not to support people in delusional or antisocial behavior. Definitely get therapy. Sounds like your kid has some serious mental health problems if they're being influenced by whatever wackos put these ideas into their head. You're going to need support in coping with this madness. NTA by a country mile. You are in no way abusing your kid by refusing to take responsibility for their bad choices. OP's response. Thank you, and yes, I don't want to minimize my daughter's role in it, but the hard anti-abortion thing surprised me too. A lot of what they said contradicted itself. It felt like I was sitting across from two people who were in their own wacko bubble. I know it's not a LGBT thing. I wish someone from their community would knock some sense into them, if it's even possible at this point. OP left an update in a comment. I logged in and received a large amount of requests for an update. Unfortunately, I do not have one. I have not seen or heard from my daughter since the last meeting, and I believe she has changed her phone number. Our community isn't a large one, and I have heard through the grapevine she is staying with a sperm donor in one of the homeless camps out in the woods. As this is a haven for drugs and sex trafficking, this is a further concern. From what I've heard, she is pregnant. Myself and a few friends and family members have driven through the camp area a few times on the lookout for her, but it's very large and there aren't exactly marked roads. Also, recently other people have been shot at while walking their dogs around there, or riding ATVs, so every time we go it's a risk. So that's it. I'm stuck hoping she's safe and under some kind of shelter. There are a lot of plywood houses and broken down RVs out there, and waiting to hear news when she has the baby. Yes, CPS and the local police are aware of my concerns. I'm worried the child will be born addicted to drugs because I don't know anyone who doesn't live out there who isn't a meth head. Thanks for your concern, all. I'm unsure what I'll do when the baby is born. I might have to take in the baby after all, just to make sure it doesn't live in that camp, and it may make me an asshole. But I am not looking forward to the hard work and drama that will come with it. New update. I posted another update in the comments a while back. It's on my account. Basically, my pregnant daughter shut me out of her life completely, and rumor had it she was living in a homeless camp with her weirdo lover out in the woods. It's a huge place, and my friends and I searched a few times but weren't able to find her. It's also dangerous because there aren't laws out there, and the homeless shoot at ATV riders and hikers and send dogs after people who come too close to what they consider their territory. To be clear, I don't think my daughter was part of that group. The camp is huge and full of meth addicts, sex traffickers, and drug labs. Anyway, the full story is in my account if you care. I did contact sperm donor's parents, and they have all but disowned him after very much the same disturbing behavior I outlined earlier, only geared toward their younger siblings. So that sucks. Back to the new news. All this shook out a couple weeks ago, but I hesitated to post because of my own emotions and the fact I know Reddit will be all over my ass for the deep anger, shame, and disappointment I have for my daughter. I came home from grocery shopping to find a strange pregnant woman at my door. That woman used to be my daughter, but had changed so much she was like a stranger. She chatters constantly so you can't get a word in. She has several small face tattoos and, forgive me for saying this, looks like she has aged 20 years. She had been living rough. She was angry I locked her out. I changed the locks after she left, and basically expected to move back into her old room with no problem, like it was just another day from back in the winter when she lived here. Of course I wasn't going to turn her away, so I guess in a way she was right. She was living in the homeless camp with the sperm donor, and I insisted she take a shower because it looked like she hadn't since leaving. She also stank bad. She had no shame about blocking my number or what she put me through by disappearing. All she wanted to talk about was the grand fate that she and sperm donor are building. That they're building a community of new people, and she went on and on and on without mentioning the baby once. I don't know how anyone can stand them, but sperm donor has multiple partners, and my daughter is one of them and is perfectly happy being his broodmare. The broodmare is my verbiage. Hers is much more royal. Frankly, based on what she overshared, sperm donor seems like a complete sex fiend. Finally, I broke in and asked, and she said she had been to the doctor regularly. That was a lie. Found out later. And all is well with the baby. At this point, I knew she had to be on drugs. If she was awake, she was talking, and none of what she said had an end or a point. Also, a lot was from Crazy Town. What I got from her was that, again, she and several other ladies, and men, somehow, were to carry the next generation of new people. Yes, the men. Yes, biological men. Sperm donor was sort of the middle of the wheel with the spokes, was how she described it. I've met him before, and I'm surprised he was able to get one girlfriend, much less whatever grouping is going on now. Anyway, sometimes she said she wanted to keep the baby, though she wouldn't tell me a plan to take care of and house it. I think she expected to stay with me, and sometimes she wanted to adopt it out, but not for the good of the baby but to spread the new people. This part is going to upset the internet, but the new people are apparently without gender expectations, and that was why she didn't know the baby's gender yet. Oh yeah, and also some of the wheel, her group, were empathic and they could communicate their feelings through the other world. As a house guest, she was the absolute worst. It was like she had gone feral out in the camp and cleaned up after herself to the point where she mostly did not even flush the toilet after using it. She ate everything, which was to be expected, but never cleaned up after herself and kept asking. Asking is too mild of a word, she demanded, for me to take her out to restaurants. I did it a couple of times because I missed her and was trying to make a connection, but then once afterward took her to the store to get baby supplies, and she was weirdly detached. Sort of picked up the first thing she saw on the shelf, and all the while it was yak 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 about her true family of new people and their grand fate. Anyway, I finally told her that she expected the baby in mid-July, which put her outside the time frame she originally gave me. I had it on my calendar. I was obsessed with the possible due date because I didn't know if she would find a baby on my doorstep or what. And yes, she was under the care of a doctor. Both lies. Getting her to focus on one subject was impossible. She would only stop talking long enough to take a breath and only listen long enough to you to stop for your own before she'd launch into a new thing, usually around sperm donor, who she loved but was nowhere in sight and was chilling back at the camp with the rest of his breeding stock, or whatever. Basically, I was waiting for her to come down off whatever high she was on when she went into full-blown labor. It was a complete shit show. She was having pains, but her water hadn't broken yet. At the hospital, it came out that she had not been to the doctor once for the baby. There are programs in our state that cover pregnancies, so that put her at high risk, so she was admitted immediately. That's when the switch flipped and she became hateful towards nurses and doctors. She said the worst things and they were absolute saints in return. She also had delusions of grandeur and told them she was their queen and accused them of trying to punish her. It was so wild, I can't even describe the monster she became. So hateful. Racist, vicious, and the worst things you can say to people, she said them. She wasn't in hard labor yet, so it wasn't entirely the pain. I pulled one nurse aside and told her where she had been living and that I suspected drugs, though I hadn't caught her using yet. They were so professional and gave her painkillers that helped her mood. Not gonna lie, they doped her up because she was acting wild. Imagine my surprise when her blood work came out clean. I wasn't there for the birth because she didn't want me in the room with her, and heaven help me, I was a little relieved because I was ashamed of her behavior. But I did talk to a social worker on staff to let them know everything I did. The lady was very nice but couldn't speculate officially on my daughter's mental state. I said she had to be bipolar or manic or something because her behavior was not normal, but she asked if she had threatened to kill herself or harm the baby, and she hadn't. They can't step in until there's a threat. Miraculously, the child was born at a good weight and healthy, and not addicted. I don't want to give too much info on them because the internet is forever and one day they may search for their own past. My daughter lucked out big time and had a normal delivery as things went. She didn't give sperm donor's name out as the father, though I did to the social worker. They can't put the birth certificate on my word. She got up and left her baby that evening without officially checking out, without saying goodbye to me or her newborn. Because the hospital is a safe surrender point, she won't be charged for abandonment. CPS asked if I wanted to take the child, and though it tore me up, I said no. There are a lot of reasons for why. A big one is I don't want to be held hostage to my daughter's whims, and especially sperm donor. I don't want to be on the hook for more children who are likely to come. Also, look at my daughter. I did my best and she still turned out this way. Maybe I shouldn't try again. I know getting a new family is almost the best thing that could have happened for the baby, even with problems with the foster system. It has to be better than the camp. But I feel like dog shit about it even now. I also suspect they'll have a sibling soon as my daughter can arrange it. I know my daughter is not well. I know she's in a cult and probably in danger, and also probably an abuser herself, based on the stories she casually dropped about other members. She is also a selfish liar, and it is luck or the grace of God or what have you that her baby was born healthy. She is rolling the dice on her life and the life of her future children. She's sick and under a sex fiend's control and now thinks she has magic thought powers, but she has some responsibility in this too. All the rest of the transgender stuff with her lover, and if she is NB or not from the past doesn't matter. She's an adult and is making some bad choices. It's hard for me to type out, but the way she treated the hospital staff was so cruel. Seriously, I had to use a thesaurus to describe it because I can't even fully describe how bad it was. It showed me that whatever else, she thinks other people are below her. It's more than the mania. I'm just there to serve her, whenever she sees fit. She knew she would be giving birth soon, so she came home and expected me to take care of her. I did, of course, because she was 9 months pregnant. And the second she didn't have any more need for me, or the baby she had just given birth to, it was easy to take off again. I listened to her for days and she expressed no feelings of hope for the baby other than a vehicle to spread their movement. No worry about their future life, and no more comments on me raising them as a sibling. She made the choice to leave and go back to sperm donor's harem or wheel or whatever. Sick or not, I'm ashamed to have raised someone with these kinds of values. Mentally ill people aren't bad people, but she has gone beyond merely bad choices. I haven't totally written her off and she may come back to sanity, but since all indications are that I'm blocked again, I'm going to think long and hard about boundaries and possibly moving. I'm worried about one day finding a bunch of curtly weirdos on my porch. So that's it, I don't know what to do. It's not like I have the resources to pay someone to deprogram my daughter, and that sounds very Hollywood. I need a realistic goal. It's more than just a cult. She needs a checkup from the neck up, and I don't have the legal standing to do anything. At least the baby is safe. That's the one bright spot. Thoughts are welcome, and, forgive me, any realistic suggestions, or just tell me if I'm way off base and I'm the asshole here. This has been a hell of a year in such a spiral. A year ago I had a somewhat of a slacker teenager under my roof. Now all of this. My parents favored my younger brother over me. They even chose to attend his game instead of coming to my wedding. Buckle up, guys, this will be kinda long. So I, 27, have a younger brother, Mike, 21. He is the definition of a man-child and a mama's boy, always complaining, always expecting others to bow to him. Just overall, an asshole. Ever since he was born, my parents fussed over him for everything. He's not special needs or had a traumatic birth or anything of the sort. He was just born. And my parents completely discarded me. My mom, 5, especially. She went from a loving mother to one of those boy moms that people make fun of on the internet. My father, 50, still showed me love and support, but he's always been too much of a coward to stand up to my mother and let me win at least once. The only one who stood for me was my grandpa, 76, who always called my parents out on their bullshit and never liked my brother. I remind him of his late wife, my grandma, and we have a very special bond. But he lives on the other side of the country and I could never see him often. Mike knows our mom prefers him and loves to shove it in my face. Because of this and his behavior, we've always been at odds. He's spoiled, a brat and an awful human. I can't remember how many times I ended up in trouble for things I did better than him or for things he framed me with. His only talent is his football skills. He won a scholarship to a nice college out of state. My parents didn't spend a dime on my education because apparently my fund had been used to cover expenses after a fire, just for me to discover years later that money was given to Mike to buy a car and a house. It's at a public university that I met Lucas. He was the first person I was really drawn to there. Of course I met new people who are now my dearest friends, and thanks to them and Lucas, who was my best friend for years before we got together, I managed to move out of my parents' house. Now both Lucas and I are well known in our fields and have very good salaries. Now, to the main issue. Lucas proposed to me a year ago. We're very private people, so we didn't post it on social media or anything, and when I told my parents they dismissed it with a "that's nice." I'm starting to think they downright didn't listen to me at all. We decided that we wanted a nice but simple ceremony and reception with our friends and relatives. Lucas convinced me to invite my parents and brother, but they never responded to the invite. And whenever I went to visit and began to talk about my wedding, without mentioning it was a wedding, my mom would always speak over me and about my brother's accomplishments and wild adventures. At one point I got fed up with it and interrupted my mom to tell her that there was an event I was planning to organize, whose date was unmovable. She told me that they couldn't attend, because my brother was playing the last game of the season that very same day, and wanted them to be there. Of course, this favoritism didn't surprise me. They missed my ballets, shows, and both my high school and university graduation for things about him. At this point, I wanted to be petty. I told both my parents that it wasn't a problem to miss this event, purposely omitted the fact that this event was my wedding, and didn't insist further. Flash forward to a few weeks ago, I got married. It was perfect. My family, Lucas's family, and our friends were all there and we had a blast. My grandpa was happy to give me away, and it was just perfect. My relatives asked me multiple times why my parents weren't there with us. I was honest and simply said they had my brother's game to attend, and couldn't come. They gave me a few looks, and my grandpa was visibly angry for a while, but otherwise nothing strange happened. After the reception, Lucas and I left for our honeymoon, and were phone-free for the whole duration of the trip. But once we got back, we discovered that a shitstorm was welcoming us home. I turned my phone on, and was unable to even unlock it before a storm of notifications popped up. Most of them were from my mother and brother. Mike called me all sorts of nasty names and insulted me because, apparently, one of my paternal aunts posted the photos of the wedding on Facebook, and captioned it with a very obvious dig at my parents, especially my mom, for missing the wedding. The post apparently went viral in my parents' community, and they've been publicly shamed for their mistreatment of me. It also turns out that my grandpa personally visited my parents to go on a tirade to shame my father, his son, to the point of tears. And this seemed to be my father's breaking point, because he was so distraught for missing his only daughter's wedding and for his father's disapproval, that he finally rebelled against my mom and is threatening divorce unless she makes it up to me. I think that's the reason why my mom has been spamming my phone with messages, at first insulting and threatening and then downright pitiful, full of begging and pity parties. Now I'm at home with my husband, deciding how to approach the situation. Most of my relatives, even those I didn't invite to the wedding, reached out to apologize for what I went through and to claim they had no idea this was happening at home. Can't blame any of my relatives. They all live with my grandpa on the other side of the country or in another state. But my mom's sisters and friends are belittling me for not telling my mom about the wedding, because now she's inconsolable at the thought of having missed my wedding. Personally, I think she just claims that to save face, but I'm not sure. The latest messages from my father and mother seem extremely saddened and hurt for missing my wedding. Now my family is divided on 3 fronts. The majority who are sticking by my side, My maternal aunts shaming me for hurting my mom's feelings, and my maternal grandparents who are adamant that I forgive my mom in light of her atonement. My best friends are telling me not to listen to them. TLDR, since some of you guys want the juice without reading the post. My parents have preferred my younger brother over me my entire life, and prioritized his events over mine. I got engaged and told everyone, but was dismissed. I sent a wedding invitation to my parents and double-checked, but they didn't respond. When I told them the date, they told me my brother had a game they had to attend. I didn't repeat that it was my wedding during the exchange and told them that they weren't missing anything. I had my wedding and now my parents are receiving backlash from my relatives and community after my aunt posted a dig at my mother. Edit. Thank you so much for the feedback and love. It's overwhelming. I'm going to address the popular questions here. I did inform my parents about my wedding. I sent traditional on-paper invites to all my guests, and was notified that all invites had reached their addressees. I did not receive any answer from my parents and Mike, a few very distant relatives, and some people on Lucas's side. I did reach out to all of them through a message to double-check, and those who hadn't replied told me they couldn't come. I asked my parents and brother via text, but they didn't respond. I was left to read. Knowing them and given all the things I had to plan, I didn't bother insisting. I didn't repeat the date of my wedding because I had already been told there was my brother's game. Plus, every time I insisted on highlighting my celebrations to get an answer, I was always told that it wasn't that important and to not be pissy and a bother. Because some things were simply more important than me. At this point, I think it's fair for me to not insist anymore. It's not worth the effort. I didn't keep my wedding a secret. I avoided telling my parents that it was my wedding to see if they would be interested in the slightest, but surprise, surprise, they weren't. Despite this, I did openly talk about my wedding with my aunts and uncles. My mother was in the room with us a few times when I discussed venues or dress shops with my aunt, the FB post one. But sometimes mom was on the phone, and other times she was just chatting with other people. She never paid attention. When I talked about it during reunions, she smiled and said, "That's great, dear," and then would change the subject. Radio silence on Dad and Mike. I kept in contact with them because, well, all the times I tried to go NC in the past years I've been harassed. I tried after my HS, bachelor's and master's graduations, to which they never bothered to show up for reasons involving my brother. Every time I was shamed for daring to turn my back on family by my parents, my brother, my maternal aunts and my maternal grandparents. I think the turning point here is that all those times, Lucas wasn't by my side. We started dating a little after my last attempt at going NC, and now that I have him here, I feel more confident in my stance. But before that, I want this confidence. As I already stated, all my paternal side lives on the other side of the country and wasn't aware of how they treated me. I did try to expose my parents once, at 14. My aunts, uncles, and grandpa reprimanded them. They faked being sorry. And then once home I got the beating and gaslighting of my life for lying. After that, Elle kept in contact regularly with my paternal side, but omitting my parents' abuse out of fear, which still haunts me to this day. Only grandpa knew, but he was always threatened to be alienated from me if he tried anything. My parents and I are not from the same city. I live in a city an hour drive from my parents' small town, and they don't know my new address because once, my brother tried to break into my apartment to steal some cash and my mother backed him up, claiming that siblings share their goods. Now I moved, and I'll be sure not to tell them where I live. My parents didn't buy my brother a car and a house before he even started high school. They bought him a car for his 16th birthday, and a house near his college when he began freshman year. They didn't spend the money from my fund right away, they just lied to me to use it later for my brother, keeping it stored for later in the meantime. Relevant comments. Commenter, do you think it would have been different if they knew it was a wedding and not just an event? OP, well, I am pretty certain my parents would have been a handful at my wedding anyway. They ruined a cousin's wedding by making it all about how my brother had just given his first university exam, and he got drunk and trashed part of the cake. So, I'm wondering what made me want to add them to the guest list in the first place, but then again in my family going NC or even LC is considered shameful. The cousin whose wedding Mike trashed cut my family off, and they've been dragged for turning their back on family over a minor accident. OP on her father missing her wedding and why it was a big deal for him. OP. Giving daughters away is a big deal on my father's side of the family. He only has me, and has made a big deal since birth despite how he treated me. Appearances, that's what matters. Make of this whatever you wish to make it. Update. First of all, I want to thank all those who were interested in my story and those who wished me and my husband a happy life. I am beyond grateful for your reassuring messages and your love and feedback. The response was overwhelming and beyond what I ever thought it could be. I love you all so much. To those who believed my story was fake, I want to say that I'm happy your family life is better than mine, to the point of thinking of my reality as a fantasy. But I'd appreciate it if you stopped harassing me in DM, claiming that I'm writing a fake story for attention. If I've missed a few details in the OG post, it's because I was overwhelmed and crying my eyes out because of my family's harassment. You are not forced to read my story, or think it's true, but I think keeping the smallest amount of decency would be nice. Oh, and before diving in the update, let me clarify a few things. Yes, the invitation specifically stated it was a wedding. No excuses. My maternal side of the family didn't come to the wedding. I'm sorry, I didn't make that clear in the OG post. Most of them were busy, and the others just gave me excuses to send a gift but did not come. That's it. Don't ask me why they didn't discuss my wedding with my mom. It's not like I live in their brain. My mother's atonement is the fact that she apologized via text. Now on to the update. Things have been a little crazy this past week. I got off of Reddit for a couple of days to gather my thoughts. Then I had a lengthy conversation with Lucas about how to proceed. He's been my rock, and I don't think I could ever love him more than I already do. My parents were always a taboo topic, but he hit me with a brutal reality check that I absolutely needed. We reached the conclusion that the fact I kept in contact all this time, stuck around and couldn't go NC, isn't healthy. I've realized that the reason I never fully went NC was that deep down I just wanted their approval, even now, for once. Pathetic, I know. But it's like a drug, being with my parents. They can be loving, funny, caring and warm, until they're not. The little love they give makes you crave for more, and you want their approval so badly you destroy yourself. But that's enough. I promised myself that things are going to change. I've thought about it and decided to start therapy, and to go NC with all those who made an issue about this situation, for good this time. After the days dedicated to reflecting on how I feel, I ended up messaging my father to tell him that, if he wanted to talk, I would meet him, Mom and Mike in a neutral location the following day. He immediately replied and agreed, and we met at the park. My father's sisters and brother accompanied us for damage control. My father looked distraught and as if he had been crying for a while. My mom looked the same, but I think it was more out of anger and embarrassment. My brother looked annoyed. I told the three of them about how their behavior and preference in regards of my brother always hurt me, and that their abusive behavior made me realize that I didn't want contact with any of them again after that meeting. My mother tried to cut me off multiple times, but my aunt, the one who posted on FB, shut her up every single time. When I asked them why they would treat me this way, they didn't know what to say. My father kept crying and apologizing without giving me an answer, and my uncle reprimanded him for it. My mother seemed as if she was asking herself that for the first time, but well, in the end she just said that she simply disliked me. Plain and simple. And my brother? He just liked the attention and made me miserable as some kind of sport. I went on with my questions. When I asked why they never responded to my invite, they claimed to have never received one. I showed them the texts, but they denied receiving them. And well, it turns out that they hadn't in fact received my wedding invitation. When it arrived at their house, they weren't there. The only one in the house was my brother, who had come visiting for the weekend. He saw the invite and, as many of you guessed, ripped it up and trashed it. And then, when I texted my parents, he deleted the messages. Wasn't hard to do. According to him, they kept my chat archived and didn't get the notification. So my parents never actually got a formal invitation. I was just distraught. I asked Mike why he would do that, and he just shrugged and claimed that it wasn't as important as the stuff they had in the program anyway. I had to stop Lucas from punching him in the face. Strangely enough, my parents were upset and started reprimanding him. He actually began to throw a tantrum and cry crocodile tears, and I must admit that I was kind of satisfied. But then my mom claimed that all was resolved. There was no need to fuss over a misunderstanding, and it was time for me to clear their name. That set me off, and I interrupted her, telling her that they weren't forgiven at all, that just because Mike trashed the invite, it didn't mean it automatically canceled all their neglect out. Plus, all that time it was still very obvious that I was having a wedding, and they should have asked about it. You want to know my mother's response? She said something along the lines of, "I did hear you talking about a wedding of yours, but I just thought you were being delusional," and seeking my attention with exaggerated scenarios. She was convinced Lucas didn't actually like me, nor would ever marry me. When I tell you I was about to trash her face, do you believe me? Another thing came up. It turns out that my brother didn't have a football game to go to at all. My parents used the fact that my husband, friends and I know little to nothing about football. We prefer soccer. And the fact I stopped asking about it when Mike would mock me during his time in high school, to make up a story to avoid my event. At the time I wrote the OG post, I couldn't confirm or deny the presence of a game because my brother has private social media and Lucas and I are blocked, and I foolishly trusted my parents' word. But no. You want to know where they went with that man-child? They went to Disneyland, because Mike wanted to go. They used the football story to cover for my brother's 100th tantrum holiday, and apparently they did it multiple times in the past months. At that point I was just completely burnt out and overwhelmed by this amount of information. The fact that I had been fooled this badly, that I was so gullible, genuinely made my blood boil, and I snapped. I stood up and told my father he was a sad, weak man, unable to stand up for his kids unless his wife approved of it. I told my brother he was a little dipshit, a poor excuse of a man that will not accomplish anything in his life and that he'll always live like the leech he is, baby to the point of uselessness. And to my mom, I told her that she was the worst narcissist, pathetic, little woman on the earth, that she didn't even deserve to be addressed and judged for her irrelevance. That not even God could help her out because she is just too rotten. Harsh, I know. My mother shot up from her seat to scream at me halfway through my rant to her, but I was just too mad. I shouted at her to shut the fuck up and sit down, and listen for once. She got so mad it felt like steam was coming out of her ears. I don't remember much after that, just that I kept talking. And talking. It felt as if all my anger and hurt just flooded out. At one point, I'm pretty sure the whole park was silent. I spat at my parents and Mike that I was disowning them all, and that if they're smart, they'll think before reaching out again. I took my purse and left with Lucas, Anna and Francis, leaving my parents and brother at my aunt's and uncle's mercy. I think at some point the reality of what I had just learned and said finally hit me, because I ended up having a panic attack on the way home. Lucas was driving, so Anna helped me through it until we stopped in a parking lot to calm me down. I am beyond grateful for their help. Once home I just fell on the bed and went to sleep. I really wanted to go with you guys' advice and post the whole thread on FB, but given my work and career I couldn't expose myself like that. One thing is sharing my story from an anonymous throwaway on Reddit, the other is on FB, with my name and face plastered everywhere. I couldn't go down that path. Instead, I did something better. I made a folder with all of my mother's insults, messages and awful comments, and sent it to the woman in charge of my mom's church. It's a tight-knit community my mom worked her ass off to enter in, but that is also extremely judgmental, and being shunned by them is a death sentence. And well, that's exactly what happened. Just like clockwork, the scandal spread like wildfire, going out of the church and reaching the rest of the small town. You can imagine what this means for my mother and father. Because of my little spill, I did find other messages from my maternal side of the family, belittling me even more for upsetting their sister or daughter and insulting her. I just didn't care anymore at that point, so I followed you guys' advice and told them that from now on, they will no longer be part of my life and that they can talk shit all they want, I just won't care. Instead, they should be grateful I don't send their nasty texts to their employers and spouses. I blocked every single one of them, grandparents included, on everything. I did find a lengthy message from my father. He apologized for not being strong enough to face my mother, agreed that what I said was true and couldn't believe that he had lost so much of my life because of her. He told me he is going to divorce her no matter what my decision will be, because he is tired of being controlled. He would like a relationship with me to make up for all the years that passed. I did reply to him, to tell him that as of now I really don't want to see him or forgive him. He has replied that he'll try his best to win me back, and that he loves me. I replied back that, as of now, I find that hard to believe, and then blocked him too. Frankly, his slimy way of trying to get out of this situation by throwing my mother under the bus is pathetic. At least, she was hateful and owned up to it. He is only able to blame others for his choices. I don't want to surround myself with people like that. My mother and brother are blocked similarly to my maternal side. Mike wrote other messages to taunt and insult me, and I just blocked him. My mom threw herself a pity party for being shunned by her community and for her marriage going into shambles, and I just replied, good riddance, before blocking her too. As for my grandpa, he has decided to stay with us for a while, to stick by my side. He really is the best, and has read some of your comments. He isn't going to admit that he's flattered by them. Since then a few days have passed, and all has been quiet. Lucas is spoiling me rotten, and I'm starting therapy soon. I know this isn't the drama-filled, revengeful update you hoped for, but well, this is it. I'll let you know if anything changes or evolves. Thank you so much for the love and support you showed me. I think I'm going to log out now. As for now, goodbye. I've decided to start therapy. I confronted my parents and brother about their behavior and ended up disowning them. I sent my mother's nasty messages to the leader of her church, and now she and her husband are shunned by their community. Relevant comments. Commenter. Maybe once your father is actually divorced and gone NC with her and your brother, there's a basis for some rekindling of your relationship. But wow. OP, perhaps, but as of now I don't want to think about it. He's been a supportive dad, but he's never once defended me in his life. His love was unconditional until my mother decided it was in fact conditional. And sometimes it really felt like his love was just something on and off. I don't want to stick around to see when the magic spell will wear off.